Happy Saturday, everybody, and good morning. I'm Peter Boyles. Saturday, December the 7th, of course, Pearl Harbor Day. It is 2024. Good to have everybody here. 710 KNUS Weather Center weather. It is a good one. 60 will be the high. Now, tomorrow is the toy run, 39th time. So look at this, 57 degrees. 39 on Monday, starts to get cold, and 37 degrees on Tuesday. We have a really good show. Let me set a couple of things up. If you were with us last Saturday, really remarkable guest, and a new book was on the market, Elvis and the Colonel, about Tom Parker and Elvis Presley. Well, we got into a lot of the Denver stuff, what had happened here. And after the show was over, I thought, you know what? I'm going to invite the fellows who were part of the Elvis Denver connections. So Ron and Bob Pietrafeso are going to be here in the studio. What time, at 11 or at 10? Adam, what time are the boys going to be here? They're going to 11 o'clock. So Ronnie and Bob will be here. Wonderful storytellers, great stories to be told. Pearl Harbor, believe it or not, it was 30, listen to me. It was 83 years ago today, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. We'll talk about that this morning. But in the meantime and in between time, there is no place more dear to my heart than STEP Denver. Please say good morning and welcome to the show. Meghan Shay, Executive Director for STEP. Hey, Meghan, thanks for coming on the show and good morning.
Good morning, Peter. It's so great to be with you. I'm so grateful for this tradition that we have.
Yeah, we do. And, I started thinking about Bob last night and about everything that had gone on. And it's so hard to tell this story without my role in it. And my role in it only shows up because Mike Rosen introduces me to Bob after I'd gained my sobriety. Tell the story of Cote and Step was Step 13 and then becomes Step Denver.
I would be honored. We are carrying on the legacy of some great men who have come before, and we are feeling their presence every day as men walk through those doors and make the decision to get their lives back. And we know that STEP wouldn't be here today if it weren't for, honestly, Peter, you, Mike Rosen, Bob Cote, Steve Shuck. There are so many people along the way who contributed to STEP's success over the years. That started with our founding in 1983. And my understanding is that STEP was formed by a group of people, actually, who wanted to do some good, wanted to help men get out of homelessness. They understood that sobriety was the root cause that was either leading people to the streets or trapping them there, which we still see today. But there was a gentleman, Ray Hayworth. I think the first executive director was named Catherine, right?
Yes.
And the beauty of this story when it comes to Bob Cote is that, yes, we hear all the time people think of him as our founder. It's really because he was our legendary leader. He led that organization for decades. But the incredible part of Bob's story is that he himself lived that life. He experienced destruction. He went through struggles with addiction, and he was that living proof of what's possible for the men who came to STEP. And through STEP helping him, he was then able to become the director of operations and become the executive director. And I think his greatest legacy really it points to those core principles that we still carry: sobriety, work, accountability, this approach that really requires the people to show up in their own lives, that we are not going to be able to do for someone something they can do for themselves and have any kind of success. It only works if the men show up in their own lives and they're accountable and they put in the work. And to me, that's the legacy of Bob, is those core principles that are the foundation upon which everything that we have today was built. And many of your listeners know Paul Scudo, our CEO. Yeah. He came in, fortunately after we lost Bob. And of course, as you can imagine, there was a lot of concern about who is STEP and can we even exist without Bob because of his influence. And Paul came in and built this program today on those founding principles that Bob put in place and really ingrained in the STEP culture. So it's been a long road, but we wouldn't be here without people like you, Peter, who
I
have
wouldn't be
given us
here.
the resolution.
I wouldn't be here. So
Yes,
yeah,
I
yeah.
know.
So I always thought about writing a book, or we should all write one, entitled "Good for One Free Meal." I really did.
Yes, we still have those cards on our
Oh,
website.
I know. And let me go. We'll go back in time. I had gained my sobriety, and we call it, the white knuckle period, where you have
Mm.
no idea what side's up. And and the story of Rosen saving the water. You've probably heard that story a
Oh,
million
yes,
times, but
it's a good one.
it's a true story. And um, Bob appeared. I don't know how Mike met Bob. I don't know how that happened, but uh, Mike meets Bob Cote, and somehow the water got shut off at Step, and not somehow they couldn't pay the bill, and they came in, and I don't even know how many men were then there. Bob lived there then, and
Hmm.
out of nowhere, as the story goes, a guy pulls up in a truck and gets out, and he's got the water wrench, which apparently is a specialty tool that you turn water back on with, and didn't say a word I don't even think introduced himself. And where is it? And Bob took him downstairs, and they cranked on the water, and then the men had water, and they could shower and shave, and whew, and that was the
I
first of
know.
many things that just happened there.
It was, I always say we had humble beginnings. I
Oh,
wish, of course,
oh,
this is
oh,
not a visual medium, but we've got photos of the original Step, which was at the corner of 21st and Market. So we've been on that same block since 1983, but moved into our current location in 88. But our beginnings were quite humble. And I've heard stories of Bob pawning in a van
oh
to
yeah,
try to pay the bills.
oh yeah,
So
oh yeah.
when I talk about our gratitude for the fact that we're not every day trying to figure out how are we going to keep the lights on, and that's because of your listeners in large part, who have given us that stability, and we can focus on how do we do what's best for the men, not how are we going to pay our bills today. And that is, of great benefit to the people that we're serving.
I think that van must have been hawked a dozen times.
You think so?
Oh,
Yeah, I've heard stories, but I don't know the details. You
yeah,
were really closely involved at that time.
but I know he would hawk it.
Hey, you got to
well,
do what you got to do,
well,
right?
he was. I mean, he was from Detroit. I think a lot of people may or may
Hmm.
know that. And he was tough. He fought in the Golden Gloves in Detroit,
Yes.
and he was close to some sketchy people in Detroit. And he made his way out here, and he told me stories of sitting in the park with a transistor, what we used to call transistor radios, getting high and listening to Mike Rosen and
Mm.
listening to me do radio shows. And I don't know how. I think that I was doing a Christmas fundraiser, and a guy that I had known, who now had slipped into total alcohol madness, came in,
Mm.
and it was a heartbreak thing. I handed him money. I think I gave him a $20 bill, and this big giant hand grabbed me and said, "You trying to kill him?"
Mm.
And I said, "Looked at," and that's the first time I saw him, saw Bob Cote. And he said, "You give him that 20. He's either going to drink himself to death on the 20, or will be killed for the money."
Mm.
And that's how I met Bob Cote.
And
And
that's still true today,
yeah,
right? And it's a hard thing for us to, as compassionate people, to wrap our minds around, because we want to do all that we can to help somebody. And it's hard to watch someone in that situation suffering. You feel you want to do all that you can. And I think the big lesson that we're trying to sort of, for lack of a better term, preach at Step is that sometimes the helping is actually hurting. And we need to be compassionate in a way that actually lifts people out
mhm.
of their misery, out of that cycle of addiction, into a place of self-sufficiency and dignity and self-respect. That's the harder path, honestly, than handing someone money. It takes a lot more work and effort, and it's not an easy road, but it is the only one that works. And with the drugs that are out there today, especially, I don't have to tell you, handing someone that money could lead to their death more quickly than it did in the past, because these substances are more deadly.
Our guest is Meghan Shay, Executive Director of STEP, that is, of course, Colorado Gives, and there's no place more dear and dear to my heart than Bob Cote and what goes on and continues to go on with Paul and Meghan and others. And it was in what people call the scuffling days or the salad days, and Bob was, I don't want to say making it up as we went along, but there was nothing that was really laid out. It wasn't, a lot of these places that they would take somebody in essence, just continue their addictions. And that's the horribleness of the stupidity of the people who run Denver. And anybody that says, well, we'll just have a hotel room and you can come to it and stay there. That's a death sentence as well, or the beginning of one. But Cote knew. I mean, and we would sit and talk in his office, and I saw him so many times, Meghan, say to a family, "Do you want to help him?" Like he was a very abrupt guy, and he said, "Do you want to help him?" And the family would say, "Yes," and then Bob would say, "Don't help him."
Mm-hmm.
You want to help them? Don't
Today we talk about consequences, right? That consequences can be the thing that saves someone's life. And whether that be family cuts them off and stops talking to them, or health consequences, or being exposed to the elements outside, or the threat of jail. And in many cases, actually about 50% of our men say that was a big motivator for them.
Yeah.
Jail or the threat of jail. Those are all consequences. Those are not easy things for people to endure, but they are the things that lead someone to real help. And actually, one of our recovery support managers, who I just love to share his story, he's a peer coach. He went through STEP a little over 4 years ago. He was living in an encampment right behind our building, actually. It's a corner of 21st and Market. You know the place, right by Coors Field?
Yeah.
Did you meet Peter? You may have met Derek.
Of course.
I think you have. So he talks about, he nearly died, stabbed behind Union Station, was in ICU, I think, for months. That didn't do it. That wasn't enough. What finally did it was he woke up under a couple inches of snow and said, I can't do another winter homeless in Colorado. And now 4 years later, he is a peer coach at STEP. He is helping save other men's lives by providing that guidance and, lived experience and expertise that only he has, right? As someone who's been through it. And so you just think about what every person on the street actually has to offer, and how their lives are being wasted because they are not being moved towards real help. They're not, in some cases, facing the consequences that will lead them to finally say enough. And to us, the compassionate thing to do is to lead people there quicker, right? And not prolong their suffering and prolong their stay on the streets by making it as easy as possible.
One of the things, Bob, and I would go with him just to go with him. I never said anything, but we would go to the different county jails. And a couple of them had agreements with STEP and with Bob that they could do time, and Bob would say, how many people are in this room because they were either getting high, trying to get money to get high, down that whole litany of crimes. And I'm sure you believe it, Meghan, but there would be 90% of the hands would be up. And,
absolutely.
And Bob would say to them, all right, I got away, when in his mannerisms and his talk. And he said, come stay at STEP with us. Now, we didn't take violent people. And I say, he didn't take violent people, and he didn't take sex criminals. But he would take, yes, but he would take the everyday, alcoholic street addict and bring him to STEP. And there was more than one time, Meghan, I saw people say, I want to go back to jail because it's easier, and I can get high in jail. And they would go
You
back to
know,
jail.
it is. That's why I have such respect for the men who choose STEP, because
You bet.
all of them are there willingly. They are making that choice every day. First of all, to enter the program, but to actually do the work. And it is not an easy program. We require our men to really step up. They have to
Oh,
get a full-time tax-paying job. They have to attend all the program meetings and, make their bed and make their own meals and, be responsible, be respectful of their peers, their brothers, right? That they're living in a 60-bed facility together. It can be
yes.
sometimes 60 men in that facility. It's not so easy. And so we're expecting our men to put in the work. And that is not the softer, easier, gentler path. And so to me, that says a lot about the people that we're serving. And I often say, who wouldn't want to help people who are willing to help themselves?
Yes,
If you're going to invest in somebody, don't you want it to be someone who's willing to make that investment in themselves and contribute?
indeed.
And that's the case at STEP. Those are the people that we really serve. And I think they deserve a lot of respect for making that choice. There are a lot of other roads they could have taken that would have been a bit easier.
Meghan Shay,
With, by the way, not as good of outcomes, right? They wouldn't get the outcome.
Meghan Shay, Executive Director of STEP Denver, and this is Gives, of course. I'm Peter Boyles, the morning show, and I'm sober. And one of the people that were so instrumental in my life was going to work for Bob and going on the board with Bob. And and I don't know if we were just contemporary enough. I mean, people lived in fear of Bob. they really did, because he just didn't tolerate anything. And there has to be a book. I was talking to somebody about it. Maybe it was Paul. There has to be a book, of the real life adventures when he got that place off the ground. The water wrench is a nice story, but he went after. I mean, he literally went after pawn shops and bars. And remember when he discovered that Social Security checks were being sent to bars for the name of the recipient of the check, and they would just take the check. A true story. He disliked several people immensely, and was Father Woody, who later turned out to be a pervert, a molester. And he would do this nonsense every year where he would give people things. He would have a mass, and he would give money. One year he gave ski gloves, and Bob says, "I'm going to show you something." And so we went into a dozen of those places that just lived off of that sadness. And there's the ski gloves on the wall, stapled to the wall. You could buy a pair of ski gloves. Every one of those guys took the ski gloves, took them in, and hawked them for wine. And I remember that. And then we went homeless for a couple of days. And when we came back in, Jimmy Carter, the first time I ever met President Carter, was in town, and we dressed down with some couple guys from Channel 7, and we went and lived in those boxes down along the Platte River. And it was this time of the year; it was really cold, and Cote was a spirit guide. Here, go do this, go do that, and I would go walk about with him, and he would, but the interesting thing about him is he had the respect of the men living on the street. It wasn't one of those, oh, here comes fill in the blank again. It was when Bob, I mean, I'm telling you, Megan, I mean, like I said, when he passed, and there was a whole side of that stuff too, that, that the Mike Rosen and I still give each other the elbow sort of over, how it worked, that he would not take money. And then Herbert Walker Bush made him a star. You remember that when that happened?
Yes. And speaking of the Social Security, I've seen videos of Bob testifying before Congress. Of course, STEP received the 1,000 points of light. We still have that recognition hanging in our meeting room so that all of our men can see it. But it is, I feel I'm always hearing new stories about Bob, and it's really nice actually when donors call and they've been giving for decades and they knew Bob and they've got stories, and he really built a great sense of community and rallied people around the fact that we could do this differently, and that we could sort of go against the grain and we don't have to try to follow what everyone else is doing. Let's try something different.
That's exactly
and
right.
What we have found is that something different actually works. And, you know, thousands of men can thank Step and thank Bob and Paul and all of these men along the way for the lives that they have today.
You bet. No, that was really, really true. There's a term called New Cut Road, and he was on New Cut Road. He knew that these do-gooder programs that give you a place to sleep would just extend the horribleness of the disease. And I was with him one time. It's real emotional. Thanksgiving, we used to always have big Thanksgivings and big Christmas party, you know, like everybody ate, everybody gathered together and everything. And there was this little Hispanic woman, and she was sitting there at the end of the table, and with this, you know, big young guy, but he looked like maybe in his 40s. And Bob would say, you know, walk around, introduce yourself to people. And I said, how do you know, happy Thanksgiving? And she looked at me, she said, you know, this is the first Thanksgiving I've had with my son in 18 years.
Isn't that incredible? And I have to tell you, Peter, these are things that we experience every day, and it never gets old. It never, you know, ceases to move me. I just actually earlier in the week I got there quite early, so I got to catch our overnight staff and have some time with them. And one of the gentlemen said, "Oh, I was at my sister's for Thanksgiving," and he said that was really nice because 2 years ago I got drunk at Thanksgiving at her house, and that didn't go so well, right? And so it's a very regular occurrence that you're hearing these stories about families accepting the men back in, and what it's like for the men to be able to show up to that family gathering and be proud of themselves and not have to worry about hiding or trying to conceal their addiction as they have for so long. We had a situation recently, actually, that I'd love to share with you, which is our director of operations. His name is Andre. He went through the program a little over 2 years ago. He is actually going to be spending Christmas with his parents and his children in, I think, Connecticut. And they had at one point a lifetime restraining order against him.
Sure. You know what that guy
actually, right? He actually burned part of their house down intentionally when he was high. And he thought he'd never have contact with them again. And at Christmas, he will be with his parents in his parents' home. He's working on getting custody of his children. So and his parents are supportive of that. It is just remarkable, the things that happen at Step that never seemed possible before.
Remember Obama was wanted to give out phones to the homeless? This was one of Cote would literally blow a gasket. I mean, you had to know him. And I've told people you had to know him. And he said, phones. He said, do you think, and he went through this whole litany, and I actually brought him on the air to do it. He said, these people have robbed from their grandmothers. They have beaten up their brothers at Christmas parties. He said they've stolen cars. I mean, he went down a litany of things that these men had done to their families. And now Barack Obama wanted to give them a telephone so they could call home. Bob said, these people don't want that. They don't want to hear from whoever, Uncle John or, your cousin Nikki. He said, they don't want to hear. He said, and he did about a 15, 20 minute takeoff on Obama and the Obama phones. He said, if these people wanted to find this guy, they find him. They don't want to find him. Yeah.
The thing that I love about Bob is that, yes, he had that hard stance, but he still knew these men are worthy of support, right? So it's that balance of not condoning or promoting
Yep.
certain behaviors, moving people
Oh.
towards, responsibility and honesty and
Meghan. Meghan.
returning to the character that, by the way, is within them. It's just concealed by their addiction. And so that's what we see at STEP is that, the men, when you are active in your addiction, that is not who you are. And so it's like they're finally becoming who they really are. And as a result, over time, their families do want to talk to them. Last year, 83% of our men reported repairing their family relationships during their stay. So it is possible, but it takes time, and it certainly isn't going to happen overnight.
No,
that's for sure.
No. Hang on. Let me do a couple of things real quick.
Sure.
This is really a special woman. It's a special group. It is that time of the year, Colorado Gives Day, and I can think of no finer place. There's a lot of places that, come on in, we'll give you a room. It's death on wheels. We'll talk. This is the pitch coming up. Then it is Pearl Harbor Day. It was 83 years ago that the Japanese, did the Japanese strike Pearl. And then we'll have Bob and Ron Pietrafeso in studio, Elvis in Denver. I'm happy today to talk to you about our friends at Water Pros. Water Pros cares about the quality of your water. You can remove those forever chemicals, microplastics, hard water. Water Pros Peter Boyles Special. You get a whole water softener. You get the point of use reverse osmosis drinking water system, which I just read that. I don't know what it does, but it really does work well. Start the process. Go to waterpros.net and sign up for your free in-home consultation. And they will come to your home and test your water and answer all your questions and concerns. Look, you guys, I trusted these guys, and they have come through. They do it right to do our water. They'll do yours. Water Pros is family-owned and veterans-owned business dedicated to providing you with the best in water treatment for less than the other guys. Go to waterpros.net today and request your free water test. 303-862-5554. 303-862-5554. 303-862-5554. And ask for the Peter Boyles Special. Good morning, everyone. It's a Saturday, and it's also Pearl Harbor Day. Saturday, December the 7th, 2024. I'm Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS Weather Center. Weather, 60 now, 57 tomorrow. Coming up, Robby Farrow will join us from Mile High Harley Davidson, talk about the toy run tomorrow. Then Monday, we caught a break, 39, and here comes the snow, 37 on Tuesday. Wonderful guest. The ski resorts are experiencing better snow conditions, making it a perfect time to consider taking your skis and boards for tunes or maybe even getting the new gear. My son, and we took my grandson, he got his boards, and also Patrice got her boards. For the best winter sports equipment, head over to Larson Ski and Sport, located south of I-70 on Kipling. John Marriott, his son Jack, Paul, all the guys who work there. So whether you're looking to rent or buy equipment, Larson's got you covered, dedicated to providing you with the best skiing experiences possible. The convenience of Larson Ski and Sport is unbeatable. The perfect stop on the way up or the way down the mountain. You'll find them in a large wooden building next to the Crab Shack, south of I-70 on Kipling. That is a misprint. The Crab Shack is no longer there. It's the large wooden building. So you westbound on I-70, let's make it that way. Get off on the Kipling exit, come down the ramp, then make a quick left back underneath I-70, come out the other side, look to your right, and you'll see a big wooden building marked Larson's. That's Larson Ski and Sport, 7 days a week. You're coming home, stay off the Kipling exit, coming eastbound on 70, just stay on the ramp all the way down, come to the corner, make a right, start down Kipling, you see them on your right-hand side. John and the guys at Larson's, absolute experts at everything you need for winter sports. Stop in today. Tell them I sent you. 7 days a week, the best of the best. Larson Ski and Sports, south of I-70 on Kipling, 303-423-0654. 303-423-0654. Park and walk in. Tell them what you need. Larson's Ski and Sport. Our guest is wonderful, Meghan Shay, Executive Director of Now Step Denver. And we're talking about, this is called about a Gibbs Day or Gibbs time, because I think, isn't the 10th is actual Gibbs Day. So I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to say that's right, but people can give now. They allow early scheduling of gifts, so we don't have to wait until Tuesday, but technically it's on Tuesday.
And so if someone were sitting there and never had heard anything about Bob or anything about Step or Paul or you or anybody, how would you tell them and why they should give to you?
Well, I think it's important to just start with our mission, and I'll just state that and then kind of speak to how Step is different. But our mission is to give men with nowhere else to turn the opportunity to overcome addiction and all of its consequences through sobriety, work, accountability, and community. And so the Step difference is that we're not just putting someone in housing, as you have alluded to a couple of times that we see often. Paul actually coined this phrase that I just love, which is we are housing first with accountability. And that's the difference. So, yes,
can I add something?
Please, feel free.
And Bob Cote's speak, that was called "We Ain't Doing Bunks for Drunks."
There you go.
He did.
We've got one of our alumni, actually, a recovery support manager, his name's Santiago. He came through Step during the days of Bob. So he's been there, I want to say 13 years now. And he calls it speaking in crayon.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful.
We keep it simple, speak in crayon, right?
No, that's.
And so I always joke with him about that. But that's kind of true that, simply put, we are not going to just put someone in a bed and hope that somehow solves their addiction. That's not going to work. It never will.
Never will.
And so, yes, we have to get people in off the street. You can't have somebody living on the sidewalk trying to go get a job. That's not going to work. We need to get them out of survival mode. And so we're going to provide them with a safe, structured, sober living environment and everything that they need, right, to be able to survive, get out of that cycle of chaos that they've been in for so long. Get some stability and structure in their life, but then we're going to help them get a full-time job and learn how to stay sober, and we're going to hold them accountable to staying sober, by the way. But we're also going to teach them all of the life skills that either they never learned or lost along the way in their addiction, so that when they leave our program after 4 to 6 months or up to 2 years, they have got a solid foundation under them, and they have learned how to take care of themselves, how to navigate anything that's going to come at life and come to them in life, which, you hear often in the rooms, live life on life's terms.
Yeah.
That's what they're learning at STEP, is how to do that. And so there is not a detail that hasn't been thought of either by Bob or Paul or our recovery support managers along the way, to make sure that every part of a man's life who's been destroyed because of their addiction can be put back together in a way that's going to last.
And we're the best. We are. Practicing alcoholics and addicts, there's nobody better than us. We were the best. And in comes this guy. And like I said, there are 3 or 4 people that are so instrumental in my recovery. And I certainly I met him, I don't know how long I'd been sober, but when I met him for the first time, and he was a street guy. Bob was a street guy. There was nothing sophisticated about Bob. And that's what made him, I think, even more powerful, because most of the men who had come in had lived as he had lived. And you weren't going to get past him. I mean, you could have a room full of recovering people that came from, wealthy backgrounds and families that still took care of them. Not with Cote. It was like he could see through you. And I think,
and that's,
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
You say, please.
Oh, I was just going to say that peer recovery piece is what makes STEP work. And it's because of the credibility that comes with someone like Bob or someone like Derek or Andre, all these men that I've been talking about, Santiago. They have lived it. And so they have immediate credibility, immediate trust and respect, right? That can only come with someone being able to say, actually, I know exactly what you're going through.
Or better yet, you're lying to me, which was the better one.
Or better yet, I see right through you, and you're not going to get that one past me, right? And so that is, I think, really the heart and soul of what makes STEP work. It's not necessarily, yes, of course, we've got this incredible program. Don't get me wrong. But it's the people who are carrying out that program day in and day out, who've lived it. They're the reason that this works. And I think that is sort of the legacy of Bob as well, because from our founding, we have had people, boots on the ground, working with these men who have walked that same road. And we're going to continue that as we look to national expansion, expanding to Colorado Springs. That is going to be in our core. But the only people running this program, really in the day-to-day, working with the men hands-on, they have to be people who've lived it.
And there was an old saying, it's a new saying, it's a modern saying, it's a total saying: don't go to somebody to get help for drugs and alcohol that they themselves have not walked that walk. And I heard that when I first, knew that I had to change my life. And there were people that didn't have a clue. I mean, wonderful, caring, giving people, and they didn't have a clue. And then all of a sudden, I meet this whole other section of people, and they called you on it, and they knew what was wrong, and they told you this and they told you that, and either do it and with Bob, it was my way or the highway. I saw that many times. And I'll tell you a quick Bob story. There was a very wealthy, prominent family, and I knew them, and they called me, and they had a relative, I'll leave it go at that, who was in trouble. So they said, would you take him? We hear you talk about STEP. And so I take him to STEP. He does great for 5-6 weeks. So he has a Sunday off, and he goes out and he uses. And I'm at home, and the phone rings, and they said it's fill in the blank, and he's high. We got him here. He's high. So, and this is a one of those moments of truth. And I go down the step, drive down the step. It's cold, it's snowing. And I go in, and I've never done this before in my life. And I know I was way out of line. And Bob and I are in the other room. I said, can you give him another shot? Bob says, if I give it to him, he said, I give it to all of them. And he threw the guy out. I mean, that's a true story.
And it's tough, and that's the hard part of this work.
Yes.
Because we want to save everyone.
Yep.
And we also have to hold to the structure that we know
That's
works.
right.
And
That's
to
right.
this day, if you are discharged from STEP for relapsing, you have to wait 6 months to reapply.
You bet.
And the reason is it's a big enough consequence that you're less likely to make that decision, right? When that thought comes, you might make a different choice, might pick up the phone, might go talk to another man, do something that you've learned that you need to do in that moment when you have that thought. Last year, actually, this current year, 10% of our discharges were relapse. So that's a pretty low percentage considering
it's incredibly
100% of the men we serve suffer the disease of addiction. And so the reason we believe is that they know if you relapse, you are immediately discharged and you cannot reapply for 6 months. So it's a big deterrent, and it actually works.
I mean, I have a visual of that. Well, the parking at STEP with the cage, and I've never done it before. And I knew the family, and it was close to the holidays, and I knew what kind of sadness it was going to bring. And he's looking at me, and he has tears in his eyes because I'd taken him in. And I said, can he get another chance? And Bob said, I give him another chance. I got to give them all another chance. You don't get it.
The other thing about it, Peter, is that there are other programs, right? It's not like we're the only place that someone can go to be safe. If they want to be sober, there are many places that they can go and get in same day. And so we are not discharging people to the street. We are discharging them with a list and saying, okay,
Denver
these
cares.
are the places within walking distance. Where are you going to go? How are you going to get there, right?
Yep.
And so it's not like we're just putting people out on the street. There are many places they can go. And what we find is that after that 6-month period, when they do come back to our program, they come back with a different mindset. They've had a new experience. They have maybe had some more suffering out there, and they come back ready and willing that second time. And we see the difference from the first day to the second for those individuals because they had that waiting time of 6 months before they could come back, and they appreciate it more, honestly, when they get to walk back through those doors.
I would, find people, or people would find me, and I'd say, "Are you high?" And no, I'm fine. Well, you can't come in until the little trip to the other room. And again, another family that I knew, and it was their son. And I said, "Hey, man, are you, because they're going to bounce you." "No, man, I'm fine." And we took him to STEP, and I don't know, half an hour later, they came back and they said, he's high. And he went to Denver Cares, and eventually came into the program and really straightened his life out. As a matter of fact, he's a baker now. He's a really gifted kid. So, I don't know, when the world is being torn apart right now by certainly this country, by drugs and alcohol. What's Meghan? How can people help?
Well, the first thing I want to mention that's so important for people to know is that we do not take government funding. So when we're talking about Colorado Gives Day, we're talking about, STEP being able to have its doors open, serving nearly 400 men a year at this point, Peter. We've grown so much over the past even 5 years in terms of how many people we can help. And we'll talk about how we're growing beyond Denver pretty soon. But we are really counting on the community to allow this model to continue. This is, again, something that is not the norm. We are doing something that is different from the standard approach when it comes to homelessness and addiction recovery. We've got over 40 years of evidence and proof that this model works and is a real solution for the people who need it. And all of this is only possible, the freedom we have to make these decisions that are based on the people we are serving and not based on what the government is dictating
It's true.
that we do, right?
Cote
Who we're going
knew.
to serve, how we're going to serve
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah.
So we are free of government funding. But the only way that we can be free of government funding is if the community members who believe in sobriety, work, and accountability step up and support us and invest in our men and give them that opportunity. They are ready and willing. They just need a chance. And your listeners have really had an impact on thousands of men over the years that I don't think any of us even know, nor could we accurately articulate. And so I want to share our gratitude and ask people to go to coloradogives.org/stepdenver to make a donation today.
It's so important in the loss of families and what happens. And then you watch this idiot mayor and you watch these other fools and housing first people, that's bunks for drunks. And the idea of, there was about a year and a half ago, and it was shot on Channel 7. I don't know if it was a live shot. And this big sort of raw bone kid had been living in a squat someplace along Larimer. And he said, I have nowhere to go. Understand, he's complaining to the reporter, I have nowhere to go. And right over the reporter's shoulder was Step.
Yes.
I mean, it was this dichotomy, and I'm saying, and that was one of those you can always tell when it gets real cold. For the first time, every television station goes out and does a bleeding heart piece on, this poor person living on the street. And Cote never had that in him. He really never did. A guy that lived it every day, his compassion, his belly fire, if you would, was to get people sober, not to continue their lifestyle on the street. And
as it should be.
As it should be.
That's for all of our, all of us as individuals, that should be our mission, right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me when you talk about the homelessness issue in Denver, well, first of all, I think it's important to say that we're helping men achieve self-sufficiency and actually move out of the cycle of dependency for less than a sixth of what the city of Denver is spending per person to shelter them in hotels.
Oh, yeah.
So just the sheltering in hotels piece, we're doing all that we're doing with real outcomes for less than a sixth of the cost. So, I think that's an important thing to note. But the other thing that is striking to me is that often, Peter, we always hear about when winter comes and these individuals, they're out on the streets and they're dying on the streets. And it's true that they're dying on the streets. But what's misleading about that message is they're not talking about the fact that the medical examiner says 78% of homeless deaths last year were directly caused by drugs and alcohol.
Sure.
So it's misleading to make it seem like it's the elements that are causing these homeless deaths. 78% of the deaths are attributed to addiction. And so I often say, if we're not willing to name the problem, how will we ever solve it? We have to name the problem that addiction is the root cause for the majority of individuals who are living on the streets unsheltered in Denver. And so we've got to tackle that first if we're going to make any dent in this issue and give people the chance to have a life worth living.
And the problem is growing. It's and that's the great sadness is if you want something, if you want more of something, subsidize it. It's a rule of economics. If you want more of something, subsidize it. And so this fool that runs the city now, and the fool before him, and the fool before him, as long as, no, I'm serious. I mean, and did any of those people ever come in and, the best of your knowledge, and say, Cote, what is it you do around here that makes this place hum?
Well, I do want to give some credit. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I do believe at Step, we really do believe that people are approaching this with good intentions. I don't want to, diminish anyone's effort. I do think that people are trying to solve the problem. We may disagree on how that problem can be solved. And what we're trying to do at Step is really share what we see works. And so, unfortunately, the mayor of Denver has not visited Step. We have offered,
I'm shocked.
Extended many invitations.
I'm shocked
From a variety of sources to get him to come and see what we're doing. Unfortunately, He has not taken that invitation. However,
Shay.
his chief of, I believe it's, chief of programming, or I don't think it's chief of staff, but someone who's really high up in his administration did come and tour and really loved what we were doing and seemed to really agree with a lot of our philosophies. So we were encouraged by that. I did then, however, attend the Roads to Recovery meeting with, in good faith to just try to contribute and be of service, even though we're not after any of those dollars. And in the first meeting, it was stated by the staff that sobriety is not the goal.
No, it isn't. Housing is.
And I haven't been back since because
I've watched
I can't fathom a Roads to Recovery initiative stating sobriety is not the goal. And so we just have a different view on how we're going to solve this issue.
You're being kind.
We're going to focus on the people we're serving.
You're being
and
kind.
Hope that the message gets out along the way, right?
Wow. I was with Bob a couple of times, and we crashed some of those meetings. Do they air, parentheses, meetings. And, Cote and I'd had my hand on his, come on, Bobby, don't. And he, what's wrong with you? I say, here we go. Here we go.
It's good he had you by his side to.
Oh, no, it was the other way around. But
it's really challenging. And especially because I think that the beauty of this, though, at STEP is that we're not after any of these dollars.
No.
So when we're going and we're sharing what we see every day, and we're sharing our views on what the real solution is, we don't have any interest in the money behind it. We just want to help people, and we want to see this community
go ahead. No, I was going to say that was the belly fire of Bob Cote, that he knew, and that's what I think. How do I say this? Angered him more than we'll know, that he knew, and none of us are ever really. We will live and die alcoholics and addicts. We know that. Mm-hmm. There isn't any time where I used to be. There you are now, and you will be the day you die. But the thing about Bob was that Bob understood that. He understood it in very raw terms, and they wanted these sophisticated. All right, how's the best way to get a hold of you?
Oh, goodness. Well, I've got a couple of things. One is, again, coloradogives.org/stepdenver. We are very excited. We have a $25,000 match. An individual donor of STEP probably found out about us from you, actually, if I did a little digging. He is going to match every donation that comes in up to $25,000. So I encourage people to take advantage of that. Help us get to that match. But we also have the homeless contribution tax credit. So anyone who gives $1,000 or more to STEP Denver will get a 25% tax credit for that gift. And so I want to encourage people to take advantage of that as well if they're able to give at that level. There's a great benefit on the back end come tax season for them for supporting STEP Denver. So we're expanding to Colorado Springs. Paul is out there on the road nationally, meeting with communities across this country who might want to step, seeing if we can take this model, this legacy of 40 plus years, and bring it to other cities across this country. So Paul's hard at work doing that. We'll be opening Step Springs in Colorado Springs this time next year.
I know.
So we are on a big path to help as many men as possible and carry on that legacy from Bob and Ray and you and Mike Rosen and all these guys along the way. So I just thank everyone for your support. We couldn't do this without you. coloradogives.org/stepdenver.
I'll say this as we say Merry Christmas. He'd be proud of you.
Oh, thank you, Peter.
He'd be proud of you. And because it makes me emotional, because you've cleaned up his act. So many times when I meet the young people that are now doing this, I say, I wish we could get in the time machine and go back 25 years or 30 years before Coors Field was built and watch that man in action. Oh,
There's a YouTube video I watched of him from that time walking the streets, and it gave me sort of a glimpse because I've heard all these stories. I got to actually see him in action, and I was very thankful for that. But I do often wonder, what would he think of us now? And I do believe he'd be proud because we are committed. Thank you. We are just committed to, carrying out those philosophies, those core principles, holding true to the Step 13 way, but also, growing with the times and doing what's best for the people we're serving today. And that Step Denver piece that Paul brought from his lived experience to be able to do the most good in a way that holds true to Bob's legacy. And that I think we are accomplishing, and I am proud of our team for that. And it means a lot to me, Peter, that you would say that. Thank you.
I'll see it before Christmas, but he'd be proud of you, Meghan. He really would. Take care.
Well, you just made my year. Thank you, Peter, for all you do.
I'll see you next week. All right, pal. Thank you.
Okay.
On the other side, it is 83 years. Pearl Harbor was attacked. And then the Pietrafeso brothers are in studio. We'll talk about Elvis and car giving and a follow-up on last Saturday's show. 710 Kane, US 60 will be the high, 57 tomorrow. You know what we missed? And we got to catch them right out of the box. We have to get Robby on from Step. From Step. Listen to me, from Harley Davidson. All right, right back after this. Better believe it. Happy Saturday, everyone. December 7th. It is also the anniversary of 83 years ago on Pearl Harbor Day. 710 KNUS Weather Center weather. It's good for what we have coming up. 60 degrees today and 57 degrees on Sunday and Monday, 39 degrees and snow. Let me do this. He's become a dear friend, and he is a motorcyclist, and he is one of the powers behind the 39th annual toy run. 24 hours from now, Robby, we got kickstands up and we're rolling. First of all, good morning and thanks for coming back on the show.
Good morning, Peter. Thanks for having me again. I appreciate you.
Man, it's really the beginning, I think, for me for the holiday season. We talk about when the toy run happens and how much good it really does for all of us. But take a second with how this all comes together and what tomorrow's about.
So as you said, Peter, we're in the 11th hour now. You can still register for the toy run. Cost of registration is one new unwrapped toy or stuffed animal. As long as the stuffed animal is new, you can bring those. And you can go to any one of the Big Iron Sports dealerships, which is Mile High Harley Davidson of Parker, Mile High Harley Davidson of Aurora, Grand Prix Motorsports, or Foothills Triumph BMW. You can register, you can get your wristband. A lot of people, what they do is they'll, have a group of people meet at one of these four dealerships. They'll register, get their wristbands, and then go to the sports park in Aurora after that for staging, which is off of East Colfax. Staging starts at 8 a.m. Gates open up. And, they've got food trucks out there with breakfast burritos. They've got a coffee truck with hot coffee for all the riders. The gentleman that makes the commemorative pins will be out there selling pins to everybody in the morning. I've been getting a lot of questions about those. First wave leaves at 10 a.m. and then the waves continue to go through until we get through all the bikes, and hopefully we have a record number of bikes. I think the most amount of bikes we've ever had for a single toy run was 3,700. It'd be great to beat that tomorrow. And then once we get through there, a great benefit this year is we get to stop. There's a parking lot where we can park and we can actually get off of our bikes and we can bring the toys to the front entrance of the Children's Hospital, which is something we haven't been able to do for the last 3 years. So that's really big that we get to actually bring our toys up to the entrance of the hospital and we get to kind of interact a little bit with the children. So that's really cool. And then once we get through with that, if you're so inclined to roll over to the Aurora location, Mile High Harley Davidson of Aurora, we have a great after party there with food, band, beverage, just a great way for the motorcycle community to come together and celebrate this thing that we've been doing for 39 years.
It is amazing. Rob Farrow's here. We also have a big breakfast early tomorrow morning. I'm going to go on the road. Robby and his wife are going to be there, and we'll be rolling. And it does mean, well, you can't, I'm sure you do, you know better than I, how many people that I know that are going to show for this. And a couple of clubs, a couple of different clubs are coming to our breakfast. And Robby, I'll tell you what, man, it means Christmas begins. And I did all my shopping yesterday, went to Target and, just buy stuff for little kids that think, well, these little kids aren't going to be getting out of bed, some of them. So you toy up for what it must be like to spend 24 hours a day in a bed. But it is something else, and you are really impactful in this one. And we will be there together, my boy, in the morning, and then we'll rock and roll, okay?
I look forward to it, Peter, as always.
You mean a lot to me, pal. Take care.
All right, brother. Back at you.
You
Take
too.
care.
Robby Farrow. So that's tomorrow. And if you'll see tons of motorcycles out there tomorrow, and guys will have there'll be guys dressed like Santa Claus riding motorcycles, and guys dressed like the Grinch riding motorcycles, and there'll be people with bags of toys on the back. And I went to Target yesterday and got some toys, and gonna double bag them and go out. We're gonna maybe spend the night at the spend the night at the hotel and Going to meet all the brothers tomorrow, so it'll be just good stuff. So good morning, everyone. 710 KNUS, and it was, believe it or not, well, we have calls already to take, but I just want to play this. Japan attacked the United States, was the fleet at the base of at Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December, 1941. What do you think led to that decision? And we can do like a little, how much history. I love listening to folks talk. Why did the Japanese attack the United States of America? Why? And why do you think that all happened? It's open lines. You can talk about anything you wish. I want to talk about just because we ended STEP and you're conflicted and somebody on the street asks you for money. And I know you want to help, but there is a better way, and it's making a donation to STEP, which you can do right now for Colorado Gives Day at coloradogives.org/StepDenver. Every day, men walk through the doors of STEP on Larimer Street, right in front of the Coors Field, and make a commitment to sobriety, work, and accountability to recover from their addiction and rebuild their lives. And the stories are unbelievable. I've seen it firsthand over 40 years. I mean, watch back when Bob and now with Paul, STEP Denver is a proven solution. It works. I can tell you the rest of it. Colorado Gives Day is December the 10th, September the 10th. STEP Denver is counting on people like you to invest in men who are investing in themselves, contributing members of our community, because STEP makes real changes happen. Every dollar you donate will be turned into $5 of impact. And since they really don't take government funding, your support means so much. Help out. Don't wait for December the 10th. Make your tax-deductible donation today. coloradogives.org/StepDenver. coloradogives.org/Denver. 303-696-1971. And then on the back of last Saturday's show, the book that was the Elvis and the General, Elvis and the Colonel, demote him, Peter. And it was the first interesting look at the relationship between Tom Parker and Elvis Presley. And almost every book that had ever been written, and I'll get a take from Ronnie and Bob about what they thought of Colonel Parker, what they thought Elvis thought about Tom Parker. But remember, it's the great automobile giveaway. And I was a young kid in the business. I was a traffic reporter. Elvis was in town. He was with the Denver cops. And he began this, it's called Cadillacs and the Mile High Legend. And Bobby and Ronnie will be here. But it was in January 14th. I read this last night. January 14th, 76. Elvis Presley was in Vail. He wasn't thinking much about skiing, but his focus was on the Denver Police Department. More specifically, he was thinking about how he could show his gratitude to a group of Denver police officers who served as his private bodyguards when he visited the Mile High City. There is a sidebar story to this as well, and it's about the so-called Black Diamond. And if you remember, there was a jeweler here in town, Kortz, Kortz. Bob Kortz became a friend, and we used to represent him on the air. And he told me the story. Jerry Kennedy told me the story, who's now no longer with us. And of course, Bobby and those guys told me the story about the Black Diamond. But Elvis is Elvis. So the gifts they had in mind were king-size luxury automobiles like, that's right, Lincolns and Cadillacs. Elvis purchased 4 luxury cars for the Denver cops. So he creates this Mile High tale that has endured for more than, believe it or not, 4 decades. And the details of the largesse of the king. And so Elvis loved cops, and frankly, cops loved Elvis. And we're working with the king of rock and roll. So wherever he went, Elvis courted the attention of police. He had the collection of badges. And the story of Elvis meeting Nixon was also about trying to become a Fed. Remember that? When he goes to meet Nixon, what does he want to do? No, Elvis wants to be a Fed. Intervening years, Elvis becomes good friends with a dear friend of mine, Denver Police Detective Ron Pietrafeso, and he's no longer with us, Bob Cantwell. So all these different places, Elvis was given a Denver Police Department uniform. And he wore that when he visited the city. In fact, Elvis was wearing the uniform when he ate the fabled Fool's Gold sandwich at the Colorado Mine Company. We talked about that. So Kennedy and Pietrafeso were in Vail when the king asked Kennedy what kind of a car he drove, as the story goes. And Captain Kennedy, who I just thought hung the moon, he became Division Chief Kennedy, replied that he had a small car. I think he had, I forget, economy car. And according to the Rocky Mountain News account that I read, January 16th, 1976, Elvis replied, "I want to buy you a family car. I got a Lincoln. I want you to have one too." And he turned to he turned to Ron Pietrafeso and said, "I'll buy you a car too." And it was Kumpf Motors. I was wrong. I thought it was Rickenbaugh. 899 Broadway, and asked if they could keep the dealership open late so that Elvis Presley could come in and buy some cars. Now, apparently the car sales guy is a guy named Ron, Heydman, and so that Elvis could come in. Heydman wasn't quite sure whether or not to believe the voice on the other end of the phone, but he agreed. 2 hours later, Presley and the police escort arrived at the dealership, and Presley instructs Kennedy to pick out what he wanted. And this part of the story I have heard from Jerry Kennedy. Kennedy played the situation coolly. He simply requests a car identical to the King's. Why not? That car was a very light blue. There's pictures of it on the internet. Light blue Lincoln Continental Mark IV. Remember them? It was 19 feet long, quadraphonic sound system, measured 19 feet, massive 16-valve Ford V8 back in 76. Dude, a vehicle like that, what was the price tag? Had to look, $13,300. So it's about 60 grand in 2020 dollars. So this stuff is so good. In order to disguise his distinct look, coming down from Vail, Elvis wore a wool ski mask over his face. After a time, the mask caused chafing, and Elvis asked for a doctor to alleviate his discomfort. Kennedy called Starkey, who was the medical coordinator for Denver cops. Starkey had once before treated Elvis for a cold. They entered the dealership. Starkey had complimented Kennedy's new ride, and Elvis takes note. Without missing a beat, Elvis told Starkey, "You get a brand new car too." Whew. The good doctor drove off in a brand new tan Lincoln Mark IV that night. While the Lincoln Mark IV is a pretty sweet vehicle, it's not for everybody. Ronnie wanted a Cadillac, and Bobby, I think, wanted a Dodge truck. We'll get him to talk about it. And they went to, this is where I thought, but they go off to Jack Kent Cadillac at 1485 South Colorado Boulevard. I went and looked at it. Around 10 p.m. Now remember, this is at nighttime, 10 p.m. at night. Elvis purchases Pietrafeso a nice blue Cadillac, sticker on the windows, 13 large. For good measure, he purchased 2 more cars for 2 women who were traveling with the party. Some accounts described them only as women, others as wives. They're never described in their given names, and Elvis was definitely not done purchasing those vehicles, because then there comes the next one. Cantwell. Cantwell's a sergeant, another Denver cop. And he was doing security for Elvis too. And he worked, of course, with Bobby. And he worked with Ronnie. No, it's Bob. He said, "Hey, Bob, I want to give you Elvis said, "Hey, Bob," to Cantwell, "I want to give you a gift." Elvis or Cantwell played off the request, saying Elvis didn't know him anything, but Elvis wasn't a guy who gave up easily, and Cantwell got a Cadillac, and it just goes on from there. And so we will talk about all of this coming up, but it's true stuff. So let me read you a couple of things. The press for the Asian co-prosperity sphere for raw resources. I think that's back to the back to what the attack. So I want to play this too, and this is great work by Adam. This is the power of radio. As radio really starts, the power of radio starts in the 30s. The golden age of radio probably stretches from 1935 till maybe 46, but certainly after the war. And this, if you would, 83 years ago. That's pretty garbled. We have FDR. Why don't we pull back out of that? And this, of course, was that moment when FDR, and as you know, he couldn't walk, but he had these one in particular, very, very strong Navy officers, young officer, who, by the way, his principal ability was he was a swimmer. Because one of FDR's great fears was drowning. But remember, he had a place he had built in Georgia. It was Warm Springs, and he had the place that, because it felt so good on what was called infantile paralysis, i.e. polio. But he would get in these very hot pools, and they felt so good. The great fear was, of course, if he fell into deep water and or crossing bridges with the trains and everything like that. So there, he had a way of appearing like he was walking, and he was kind of rocking. He wore these big iron braces on his legs, and sometimes it was his own son. His son would be on that one side and the other guy, and he mastered this ability to walk, which of course he couldn't do. But then, as that happened on a Sunday, and he comes on radio and gives this speech.
With its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense, but always will our whole nation remember the character of the onslaught against us.
He could speak. And that was the declaration of war. And now we were able to read the Japanese plan. The Japanese plan actually was very simple: to destroy the fleet. And that way the Americans would not be able to fight back, as Japan's armed forces would spread across the South Pacific. So on December the 7th, after actually years of planning and practice, the Japanese launched the attack. I remember reading one of the Toland books, And every graduating class from whatever the Japanese equivalent of Annapolis is or was, there was only one question on the final exam. How would you attack Pearl Harbor? And they planned it and planned it and planned it and planned it. So about 8 o'clock in the morning, the Japanese filled the sky over Pearl, and they had bombs and bullets coming down on these vessels that were moored. And at 8:10 in the morning, that bomb smashed through the deck of the battleship Arizona and landed in the forward ammunition magazine. The Arizona exploded and sank. 1,000 men were inside. The next torpedoes hit the Oklahoma. In less than 2 hours, the surprise attack was over. And every battleship in Pearl Harbor, the Arizona, the Oklahoma, the California, West Virginia. Remember, battleships are named after states. Arizona, Oklahoma, California. It was also, this was, as historians say, the end of the battleship navy. But all but the USS Arizona and the Utah were eventually salvaged and repaired. And all in all, the Japanese attack on Pearl crippled or destroyed 20 American ships, more than 300 airplanes, and they were dry docked. And more importantly, more than 2,000 men died. Why? And of course, the Japanese failed to cripple the fleet. And by the 40s, the battleships were no longer, it was aircraft carriers and submarines, and it does change. It morphs through the war. But Pearl Harbor, what do you think it meant? The Pearl Harbor assault had left the onshore facilities, oil storage, the depots, repair shops, shipyards, submarine docks, all intact. There was never another wave. Remember, it was the big argument. Why didn't you come back? As a result, the Navy was able to rebound and defeat the Japanese. Why did the Japanese try that? That's always a great call. I mean, it's always a great question. Why? And they knew. They knew they couldn't. I mean, there was a lot of speculation. Did they think that they were going to, they thought we were cowards and that we were going to knock them out of the box, and that was going to be that. And I'm reading a book right now called, it's really well done, and it's called America First, about the firsters. And this guy spends a lot of time with Lindbergh and Lindbergh's diaries, and realizing that, and he really does write about Lindbergh, and then what Lindbergh's thoughts about Adolf Hitler were, and then more about what Adolf Hitler had to say about all of it. So it is your turn. It's open lines, 303-696-1971. 39 years ago, the toy run began. 83 years ago was Pearl Harbor. David Ellis, you heard me talk about David taking your valuables to David Ellis Jewelers to get a fortune in cash and secure an appraisal from David for all the valuables that you have tucked away in your home. And it is still true. Share the work and everything that David's done. I saw David this week. Just in case you don't have a Rolex watch, rare coins, or silver tea set, see David Ellis for all the most meaningful gift-giving occasions. David Ellis Jewelers, they have the very best and right items, just the right price, special people. This is holiday gift-giving season. Get ready. Antique watches and emerald pendants, gold necklaces and diamond rings. They add up. Trusted jewelers been buying precious metals and antiques in Colorado for decades. Dazzling cases filled with hundreds of new and used pieces your loved ones will treasure. It is a great price at a great time. Visit David Ellis and see for yourself. He's my friend. And look at the black awning. You can see it. That's where you park. Black awning on the corner of 3rd and Clayton and Cherry Creek. Explore davidellisjewelry.com or call my friend David, 303-322-8779, 303-322-8779, and tell David Ellis that I sent you. Okay, so we got a break here. Okay, We'll come back on the phones right after this. All right. Pietrafeso will be in studio in the next hour with Elvis stories. Good morning, everyone. 60 will be the high, 57 for the toy run, and 39 on Monday. To the phones we go. We go to John. Hey, John, you waited. Good morning. You're on the show.
Good morning. I just had kind of an anecdote about the beginning of the war. My dad volunteered for the Army in September of 1941. He always claimed it was because he was helping his dad take the wallpaper off the dining room for the fourth time. He couldn't stand it anymore. but then, seriously, he said they knew they had to stop Hitler. Japan was nowhere at all on the radar.
Yeah, well, the Japanese, and again, it gets into this whole thing about racism and skin color, and there's a lot of subtleties that went into that time period.
And then he ended up getting sent to the Pacific, and they sailed, if you can believe it or not, it was on the Thomas H. Berry, a recommissioned ship. They sailed out of New York City because there was nothing in the Pacific, no Navy, no anything.
Well, they
had to go out of New York through the Panama Canal and over. But that was just kind of a little anecdote for the war.
When they went, it's really interesting what leads up to it. But remember, Japan declared war on China in 1937, and at the Marco Polo Bridge. And then there's also something. There are all the atrocities. The Nanking Massacre is perhaps, one of the worst, if not the worst. And the United States government, remember, FDR's president, responds to this with a battery, and this is interesting, knowing what Donald Trump's about to do, but economic sanctions and trade embargoes. And the reasoning, and I think this is why history is so repetitive, the FDR's administration reasoned that without access to money and goods, especially oil, Japan would have to rein in its expansion. And instead, the sanctions made the Japanese more determined to stand their ground. And during the months of negotiations between Tokyo and Washington, D.C., neither side was going to budge. And at that point, looking back, historians know that war at that point was inevitable.
And I think it should be noted that we completely conquered them totally, and the conquering general, MacArthur, went and set up a government and and got them out of the hole and did what Lincoln said: the best thing to do to your enemy is make him your friend.
Remember, he gave women the right to vote, which was, in the structure of the Japanese, he gave the women the right to vote. They created what was called a diet, the place of parliament. But I mean, Hawaii, and not that I'm just a reader, but Hawaii is near the center of the Pacific Ocean. It's 2,000 miles from the mainland, our country, and about 4,000 miles from Japan. And none of the thinkers believed that the Japanese would start a war with an attack on these distant islands of Hawaii. What does that do to you and your thinking about 9/11? No, seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it makes you worried that what could happen yet today that you can't think of.
All right. Well, you know this much, Herman. I think we should all know this much, that all of these 7 and 6 and 8 and 9-year-olds that are in Gaza, who are they in 10 years?
It's That's a good question. It makes you even wonder if wait 10 years, who is here right now?
Oh.
All the guys who've been coming across
Sure.
the border and everything.
And again, we come back to the lack of the ability of the intelligence community to see what was building up with Obama. So additionally, the same thing was true. The American intelligence officials were confident. They would give these reports to FDR that they were confident that the Japanese attack would take place in one of the nearby European colonies, the Dutch East Indies, which is a colonial state, Singapore, another of the same, and also Indonesia. So, but the military leaders and the government, we didn't have a CIA, but they were expecting an attack so close to home. And then the naval facilities at Pearl were relatively undefended. So they were not expecting an attack close to home. Naval facilities at Pearl Harbor were undefended, and most of the entire Pacific Fleet was moored in this place called Ford Island. I've been there a couple times. And so the repetitiveness of all of this is striking.
All the sneak attacks, Washington crossing the Delaware is equivalent. Nobody saw that coming.
Yeah, but that damage.
9/11, October 7th.
Yeah, that's shocking.
But it is a lot of intelligence failures. But on an unrelated, before I go, tomorrow is another anniversary. John Lennon was shot on the 8th, I believe.
And tomorrow, all the FM stations they'll play Imagine.
Yeah, you bet.
I'll watch. Good call. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Does everybody see the repetitiveness of this? And now we're sitting watching what we're watching again. 303-696-1971. Danny Kaplis' law firm. I got invited to do Dan's show next week with him about the Ramseys. And I got a nice text from him and said, yeah, I'd love Dan and I sit down and talk about this idiocy from Netflix. Dan Kaplis is the son of a cop. We've talked about it many times. Seminarian. He's a good man, everybody. That's, somebody Kaplis. He's a good man. Son of a cop and former seminarian. And Danny's believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado history to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. Also believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history. Dan Kaplis Law is the official law firm, partner of the Nuggets and the Colorado Avs. Danny Kaplis, serious firm for serious cases, and my friend. And I'll do a show with him one day next week. Dan has accepted righteous injury cases on percentage fee basis, and he can represent good people, all walks of life. I heard Jeff Hunt say this. Put his phone number in your phone. 303. I thought that was really smart. 303-770-5551. 303-770-5551. 303-770-5551. Hit dankapleslaw.com. Pietrafeso brothers on their way, 710 KNUS, Denver's talk station. The anniversary of Pearl Harbor is Saturday, December the 7th. 60 will be the high, and then 57 on Sunday. We have jammed up. Let's go to Mike. Hey, Mike, thanks for waiting, and you're on the show.
Hi, Pete.
Hey, brother.
I got a story about Elvis's Cadillacs. My brother-in-law and his neighbor, Ralph Johnson, he was a captain of the Denver Fire Department at that time, and he was friends with one of the Denver cops that got a Cadillac. He actually brought it up to our brake shop on West Colfax on a Saturday.
Wow.
So it was a black Cadillac, and he let us all drive it around West Colfax. Us and the other two mechanics, and it had a plaque on the console that said, "This Cadillac especially given to you," and they had the Denver cop's name. I can't remember it, but that was pretty exciting. That was.
Yeah, I can ask which one of the guys got that car. I know.
Yeah, it was black Cadillac. I know that.
Because I remember Division Chief, he got a Lincoln. Kennedy got a Lincoln, and I think Starkey got a Lincoln. And I'll let the guys say who got what. I would be wrong either way, but I think Bobby, when Bobby got a truck, I was trying to think of the name. You remember when Ford made El Ranchos and Chevy made Camaros?
El Camino.
Yes. What was the name of the truck that Dodge made?
Oh man,
it was tricked out. It had little mini fins on it, and
yeah, I remember. I can't remember. I actually worked on them. I can't remember.
And I think Bob still has his. He may be the only one left that kept the truck, because I'm sorry.
I wish I could remember that policeman's name. I just doesn't ring a bell. It's been so long.
One of the things I've made a decision to do is try and put some of the old time stories on the radio show, and
that's why I like listening to.
You're kind. And by the way, Dick Kreck passed away. He was another one of the columnists for the Denver Post, and
oh yeah, I remember him. Yeah,
did a city side column, and Dick's now gone. So,
wow. Okay, thanks, Pete. Good
Thank
talking
you.
to you.
You too, brother, man. All right, happy today to talk about Water Pros. I tell people how cool what a great gift for the family. You can remove forever chemicals, and you can remove microplastics and hard water, and Water Pros Peter Boyles special. There you go. And you get whole water softener and point of use reverse osmosis drinking water systems fully installed. So you start the process, you go to waterpros.net and sign up for your free in-home consultations. They come to your house and test your water, and they show you the results, answer all of your questions and concerns about your water. Look, stuff can make you sick, make you ill. It's not good for your family. Find out. Trust these guys. The Water Pros, family operated, veteran-owned business dedicated to provide you with the best in water treatment for less than the other guys. So go to waterpros.net today. Request your free water test, or that's the best one. Just say, I want my water tested. Call 303-862-5554, 303-862-5554. Ask for the Peter Boyles special, 303-862-5554. Coming up, Ron and Bob Pietrafeso, 710 KNUS, Denver's talk station. I'm Peter Boyles. We made it to a Saturday. The best laid plans of mice and men. Good morning, everybody. It is there, do it right, Saturday, December the 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, 2024. I'm Peter Boyles. We're on the air everywhere. 60 will be the high today, 57 for the toy run tomorrow, and Monday the snow comes back at 39 degrees. This began a week ago when we had the new book was out entitled Elvis and the Colonel. And it got into talking about what happened in Denver. And so we booked the Pietrafeso brothers and some misfires. Ronnie is in Maine, and Bobby's on El Rancho Pietrafeso. Let's, if we can, bring them up. Would you bring them up for us, Adam? First of all, say good morning. Is that Ron? Is that Ron? Ron, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Thanks, brother. Thank you for doing this in about 2 seconds. Bobby, do we have you too as well? We don't have Bobby. We just have Ronnie. I apologize for the screw ups, and you're out of state right now. So this whole story began. We're waiting for your brother to join us, but this whole story began with you, Elvis, Jerry Kennedy, and a handful of people. I would rather have you guys tell the story than me lead. So begin at the beginning. When did you first meet Elvis?
Well, I was on a security detail that was run by Captain Jerry Kennedy, and this would have been 1969, September. Elvis was on a tour, and Denver was the last stop on the tour, and we found out later that the last city that he normally would play in on his tours, he would spend an extra couple of days just to recuperate. So we were, people ask me all the time, how did you become friends? And I said it was fate because he happened to stay that extra couple of days in Denver, and we were with him 24 hours a day for almost 3 solid days at the Radisson. Peter, you remember the Playboy Club?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I imagine you remember it very well.
Well, the first radio station I worked in, and that's where I think I first met you, was Cat Radio, KAAT, the big cat of the Rockies, and it was on the floor below the Denver Playboy Club. Yeah.
So we secured the 11th floor of that hotel. The entire floor we took, and he spent that extra couple of days, and he wanted to recuperate, and we spent a lot of time talking about police business, and I mean, we wanted to talk about him, but he wanted to talk about cops and robbers, and he was a real he loved the police, he loved the military. He was such a true American that it was nice to be around him. With all of his fame and fortune, he still was, when you got him one-on-one, just kind of a regular guy. And he had his gun collection with him that he was showing us, and his badge collection that he was showing us. And he was hinting towards, geez, I don't have a badge from Denver. And so Jerry Kennedy went to the chief, and for dignitaries and special guests, we used to get a honorary lieutenant's badge, and it was an actual gold badge, but it said honorary lieutenant on it. And we got him one of those, gave it to him, and he didn't act very happy, to be honest with you. And Joe Esposito, who I became very good friends with. In fact, I'm up in Maine with Patrick Patelli and his wife, who I met through Joe. Joe said to me, when I asked him, Elvis doesn't seem like he's very happy with, he said, well, I got to be honest with you. It says honorary on there, and he wants a real one. And all of his other badges, if you notice, none of them say honorary. So I went to the captain, and Jerry said, I got to go to the chief. He said, but I don't think we've ever given one out that didn't say honorary on it. So he went to Chief Dill at the time and asked him about it. And he said, okay, give it to him. And So we got him in one of the actual badges, and it obviously made him very happy. But this guy was such an American. I mean, he was such a supporter of police. I'll tell you another quick story about badges. We were several years later after that original meeting. I was talking to him. We were on a snowmobile trip up in
and I want to bring that up with a sidebar story. Ron Pietrafeso is with us. Go ahead, sir, please.
So we were up in Vail. We had rented a big house up there, and we were snowmobiling. And we started talking about badges, and he said, "Hey, I got a quick story to tell you." He said, a long time ago, he said, I met the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Peter slips my mind now. His name was John something. Might have been John Ingersoll, but anyway, he was in Washington. He was the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and he was thanking Elvis for all the support for law enforcement. And he said, anything I could do for you? And Elvis said, yeah, I'd like one of your badges. He said, oh man. He said, Elvis, we've never done that before. There's no way I could do that. He said, well, you're the head of it. And he goes, well, I'm the head, but really the only person that could ever authorize that would be President Nixon. Mm-hmm. And so he said, well, it was not even a year later. He said, I got invited to the White House for all my support. I had donated some money to some of the military stuff. And he said, President Nixon invited me there. And he said, I was sitting in his office. I jokingly said, were you dressed in your normal cape? And yeah, he said, I had my cape on. And he said, I'm sitting in the Oval Office having tea with President. And he said he was thanking me for all my support. And he asked me, is there anything I can do for you? And he goes, well, there is. He said, I'd like to have one of your drug enforcement badges. He said, no problem. He said, Nixon turned around, picked up a red phone behind his desk and said, get John on the phone. And he said he got him on the phone, obviously. And he said, hey, John, I need to see you right away. Bring one of your badges with you. And he said, so when he walked through the door, saw me sitting there in my outfit with the president, he said he was kind of shocked. And he said, I looked up at him and he said, you were the one that told me that only the president could do it. So that's why I'm here. So he had those kind of stories. He just, like I said, he built the very first police gym in Denver. We never had a gym for the officers to work out in, and he found out about it. And Peter, you'll remember this. You remember when Merle Nadine was shot at the White Spot?
I do.
The off-duty officer?
I do.
We had told him about that, and it was shortly after that he was in Denver, and we said something about a gym. He said, well, where's your gym at? And we said, well, we don't have one. And he decided he was going to fund buying all the equipment for a gym. And so the very first gym we had was in the basement of District 2, which was out there off of Colorado Boulevard. And he said, I want you to name it the Merle Nadine Gym. And instead of doing that, we got a bronze plaque that was above the door of this new gym, and it said Merle Nadine Elvis Presley Memorial Gym.
Well, that's where the boxers, the Denver police boxers, trained there too. Yeah. Yep.
And I have that. When they tore the gym down years later, Jerry gave me that brass plaque that we had, and I still have that.
Can I bounce a couple? Can I bounce a couple off you and have you respond? Ron Pietrafeso is here, and we'll get Bob on next week or the week after. So when Division Chief Kennedy dies, and I go to church, I go to mass, and back of me sitting Mike O'Neill, and down in the right corner of it was with the church. I don't want to name the church because that's probably unfair, but the pew was missing. And O'Neill gives me the elbow and says, "You notice there's a missing pew?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, when Division Chief Kennedy's brother died, Elvis came and sang at the mass, and he brought the crew with him. And he said, Elvis sat in that pew. And I said, "Well, where's the pew now, Mike?" And he said, "It's at Jerry's house." he said, he took it with him. And
but Peter, that was the kind of guy that he was. We had only known Elvis for maybe 2 years when Jerry's brother died, and he heard about it long distance. Now he's in Memphis, and we're in Denver, and this just shows you the loyalty that this guy had. I mean, here's probably the biggest entertainer in the world at that point, and he calls and says, "I want to come to your brother's funeral." And one correction, he said, I'm not gonna sing there because I don't want to become a spectacle, but I'm flying the Stamps Quartet.
That was it. Yes.
Behind, he said, "I'm flying the Stamps Quartet with me. They're coming with me in my airplane, and I would like them, because they're the best gospel singers in the country.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to do that for you, Jerry." So he flew the Stamps Quartet up to Denver and for the funeral. And he, again, you would have had to been there to see how respectful he was. He said, "I want to come in the back door. I don't want anybody to see me parading into the front. I don't want this to become an Elvis spectacle." He said, "This is for Jerry's brother." And
Wow.
so that's the kind of guy he was.
The story about another person that we share was Bob Courts. And Courts told me the story of the Black Diamond. Now, is it a true story? Courts.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, Courts was the straight up guy. Tell the Black Diamond story, if you would.
We were in Vail that same time when he bought all of us the Cadillacs and the Lincolns that he bought. We were in Vail snowmobiling, and Elvis was enthralled with Scientology and the Star books, and he's reading this book, and he says to me, "Hey, look at this." He said, "It says my lucky stone is a black diamond."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Oh, really? I've never heard of that before." He goes, "Yeah, me either, a black diamond." He said, "Can you find me one?" And this was typical Elvis. I mean, everything had to, and the reason it was typical Elvis is that over the years, because of who he was, every time he had a request in front of somebody, they went out of their way
Sure.
to make it happen.
Sure.
And he knew that. So he said, "Ron, you know a jeweler?" And I said, "Yeah, I know a jeweler in Denver very well. They've been around for years. Courts Jewelry, I know Bob, the son." And he said, call him, man, and see if he has a black diamond." So I called Bob on the phone, and I said, "Hey, Bob, I'm up here with Elvis," and told him the story. And I said, "You have a black diamond?" He started laughing. He goes, "No, Ron." He said, "They're really rare.
They're junk." He told me they're junk. He said nobody wants black diamonds.
I could get one out of New York."
That's the same story.
It'd be several days. And I said, so I got back. I said, "Well, thanks anyway." So I got back, and I'm telling Elvis, I said, "Elvis, listen, this is one we can't do. I'm sorry. You're not in New York. You're not in LA. You're in Denver, Colorado." And he said, "There's nobody in Denver that would have a black diamond." And about 4 hours later, and I tell this story, and sometimes I think people don't believe, but about 4 hours later, I get a call from Bob Courts. He goes, "Ron, you're not going to believe it." I said, "What?"
Yeah.
He said, "There's a diamond broker in town from New York."
There you go.
And he said, I asked him, and he said, "Yeah, I happen to have one with me."
That's the story.
And he said he's got it. And he said, "I don't know how much it costs." I said, "Well, let me tell Elvis." So I tell him, "Hey, listen, you're lucky again." I tell him the story. This diamond broker's in town. and he's got this black diamond, and he says, "Tell him to buy it. Tell him to buy it." I said, "I don't know what it costs." He goes, "Doesn't make any difference. Just tell him to buy it." And at the time, I don't remember exactly, but I think the guy from New York, obviously, because of what Bob was telling him, he knew it was for Elvis, so I'm sure he marked it up like they always do when they do something for the king. And if I'm guessing now, because I don't really remember, but I want to say it was around 10 grand is what.
And Courts,
it was big.
Yeah,
it
Courts
was a
told
big
me.
diamond.
And Courts told me, he said that
big
nobody wants black diamonds. They're carbon fouled or something. Courts was a great guy and could really tell good stories. And he said, did they really end up on snowmobiles on I-70 trying to get to Vail or how somebody had to do something really to get that stone there? What was the truth of
Bob? Yeah. No, I remember very well. I said to Bob, buy the diamond, and can you get it up here today? And of course, he was turning cartwheels. Yeah, do I get to meet Elvis? I said, yeah. And so he tells the story. Bob tells a funny story, and I'm sure he told it to you, Peter, that he was driving a Porsche Carrera at the time, and he was going to come to Vail. I said, Bob, you better be careful. You know, it's a lot of snow. And he goes, no, I'll be there. And when Bob tells the story, he said, there were places where I'm doing 90 miles an hour. I can't wait to get to Vail driving my Porsche. So he got down by the highway and he couldn't get any farther. And we had to go down on snowmobiles and pick him up with the black diamond. So we get it up to the hotel. Now about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night by the time he gets up there with his diamond. So he brings it in. Elvis sees it. Oh, that's absolutely great. He looks at Bob and he says, Bob, do you know anybody here in Vail that's a jeweler? I can get a stone set.
Yeah, that's the story.
And Bob said, well, yeah. He said, I know a guy. He said, I can call him in the morning. And Elvis looked at him and he goes, can't you call him right now?
That's the story.
And Bob said, Elvis, it's 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
You know the guy's phone number?
Yeah.
And he tells Elvis, yeah, I know his phone number. He said, but, well, let me try. And again, things had done like this for Elvis for so many years that the minute somebody hears that it's for Elvis Presley, they do all kinds of crazy things. Sure. He calls this jeweler in Vail and tells the jeweler, hey, it's Bob Courts, tells him the story, but he wants to have it done tonight. The jeweler says, oh, can I bring my family with me?
That's the story.
So now, by the time we get to the jewelry store and unlock it, it's midnight. and he has all these mountings, and Elvis picks out a mounting that he wants, and the guy sets this black diamond in this mounting. And we finally get back to the house about 1:30 in the morning. But those are the kinds of things. And the other thing, Peter, that I want your listeners to know is that this man was the most generous person I'd ever been around in my life. Besides buying all the cars he bought the one night in Denver, and there were 13, by the way, he bought 2 Lincolns and 11 Cadillacs that night. And they went to not only Captain Jerry Kennedy, but myself and my partner, but he bought cars for all of his mafia, the Texas or the Memphis mafia that was his security, had some of their wives and girlfriends up for this snowmobile trip. So he bought all of them cars, and I had to worry about shipping them back to Memphis. But the next morning, we were sitting in Vail in front of the TV, and you'll remember this, Peter, because you knew this guy very well. Don Kenny was on Channel 4 on the news, and he's talking about how Elvis bought all these cars and what a great guy he was. And he went on and on, what a nice man, bought all these policemen and all these other people cars. And jokingly, he said, and Elvis, if you're listening, I'd like a Seville. And Elvis looked at me and said, you know that guy?
Sure.
I said, yeah, I know him very well. He said, call him. So I called Channel 4 and asked for Don, and Don comes to the phone, and I said, hey, Don, it's Ron Pietrafeso, and got a guy here who wants to talk to you. So I hand Elvis the phone, and he says, Mr. Kenny, and this is Elvis. And pretty soon he hands me back the phone. He said, he doesn't believe it's me. So I get on the phone and said, hey, Don, listen to me. This is really Elvis talking to you. And so he goes crazy on the other end. And I hand the phone back to Elvis, and he said, Mr. Kenny, that was such a nice thing you said about me. I really appreciate it. And he said, you know where Jack Kent Cadillac is at? Don said, yeah. He said, well, you go on down there. I called ahead, and you go pick yourself out one of those Sevilles because I paid for it already. Well, Don went berserk.
Yes, he did.
Me back on the phone, and he said, Ron, is this real?
Yeah.
I said, it's as real as you are, Don. But those are the kinds of things that he did for people all the time that he never got credit for. I mean, they wanted to talk about drug use, and they wanted to talk about this, that, and the other about the guy. But all the really good things he did, the creation of the first Denver police gym and buying us cars because we were nice to him. He bought a car for the police surgeon, Dr. Starkey, because while we were in Vail, he got a rash on his neck that was really a bad rash. And he asked us if we could call a doctor. So we called the only doctor that we could talk to on the phone, who was the police surgeon, Dr. Starkey. And we said, hey, we're up here and he's got this rash. And he goes, oh, I know a cream that I can prescribe for him. It'll get rid of that. So he buys the doctor a car that night because he had prescribed a cream to get rid of the rash on his neck.
Ron Pietrafeso is here, Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS. This book we did on the show last Saturday entitled Elvis and the Colonel. And I talked to your brother about it. I want you to read that book and give me feedback on that book, because the guy's the first guy that I ever read that ever said something, a series of things nice about Tom Parker. And then that brings up all of this.
Well, then he didn't know him very well. Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
I didn't know him very well.
Tom Parker was a heel, wasn't he?
Yes, let me tell you. In the late, he created Elvis. There is no question that he created Elvis Presley. He was very, very sharp. He was a barker at a carnival.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Where he started out, but he recognized a very unusual talent, and he knew how to promote it. And the mistake that Elvis's father and Elvis made in the beginning was the original contract was a handshake contract between them and the Colonel, and it was for 50% of everything that Elvis earned.
Yeah. And
later in life, especially like when Elvis came to Colorado in that first episode I told you about in '69, the Colonel was there, but he didn't even stay on they weren't even speaking hardly.
That's
what
stay. Well, you told me that before.
He didn't the same floor.
Yeah,
he was a floor below us.
No, you told me that before.
I remember when Elvis told the story to us and I think it's in that movie. It's not as well depicted in the movie, but I know it's in that movie where he was in Vegas and he went to the Colonel. Him and his father went to the Colonel to try to get the contract amended, and because the Colonel was making millions, millions off of Elvis and his contract was for not only for the concerts and the movies, it was all of the T-shirts and hats and anything that got sold with Elvis. He got 50%, and so him and his father went to him and to say if they could change it after all those years, where he had already made the Colonel millions, and the Colonel, and I hate to talk about a person that's but he was an addicted gambler.
Yes, he was.
He was losing lots of money gambling, and So when they went to ask him to see if they could change the contract, he was very direct, very nasty, and said not only no, but, and I won't use the word on the radio, but F no.
Yeah.
I'm not changing nothing. And when Elvis told us that story, he almost had tears in his eyes. I mean, and I really believe to this day, Peter, that was a lot of his depression that caused him to gain weight, to not feel good about himself, because of this terrible thing that the colonel did to him.
Can you do this? I mean, this is such a special moment. I want to bring up the mine, and I want to bring up Fool's Gold and all the rest of it. I know you're busy, and I know it's family, and I know it's the holidays. I need to sell something. So can you give me 15 more minutes, Ronnie? If you have to go, I understand.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I said, if you can give me 15 more minutes after the other side of a break. I mean, we're getting such good feedback on this segment. Can you stay and give me another 15, give me another 20 minutes?
Yes.
Hang on, sir, please. It's Ron Pietrafeso, everybody. Have you been conflicted when somebody in the street asks you for money and you want to help, but there's a better way, and it's making a donation to Step Denver? So you could do it right now for Colorado Gives Day, coloradogives.org/StepDenver. Every day, men walk through the doors of Step on Larimer Street. We spoke about it earlier this morning, right in front of Coors Field, and make a commitment to sobriety work and accountability and recover their lives. Stories are unbelievable. I've seen it firsthand for 37, 38 years. Step Denver is a proven solution. I can tell you the men, they're worthy of your support. This Colorado Gives Day, December 10, Step Denver is counting on people like you to invest in men who are investing in themselves, because Step makes real changes happen. Every dollar you donate will be turned into $5 of impact. And since they don't take government funding, your support means so much more. So don't wait. December the 10th, make your tax-deductible donation today. coloradogives.org/StepDenver, coloradogives.org/StepDenver. Good morning, everyone. This has been back-to-back great radio shows talking about Elvis Presley in Denver, Colorado. It is Saturday, the 7th of December, Pearl Harbor Day. I'm Peter Boyles. This is 710 KNUS. 60 will be the high and 57 tomorrow. Kind enough to be with us. He is in Maine on a family holiday. Ron Pietrafeso, of course, Denver Police, Captain Jerry Kennedy, and Presley strike up this friendship, and Ron's on the job, and the rest is history, along with his brother and Bob Cantwell and so many others. One of the stories that is always told, and again, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you doing this with us again, Ronnie, but Elvis is wearing a police uniform that was given to him by, was it Chief Dill that gave him the uniform?
Well, here's how the story went about the uniform. Again, he and I and Jerry were sitting in his room at the hotel, and we were talking about all kinds of things. I mean, he was obviously a really interesting guy to talk to. And one of the things he said to us during this conversation was, he said, you know how difficult it is for me to be out in public. He said, I can't remember the last time that I actually went to a restaurant, sat down, because he said, people want autographs, they want pictures. And he said, he said, it's not, I don't want to do it, but he said, I would consume my whole time. He said, I wish there were a way where I could go to a restaurant and just sit down and have a meal in a regular restaurant like normal people. And Jerry and I looked at each other, and I said, I have an idea. And he said, what's that? I said, we'll put you in a uniform, and we know the name of a restaurant in Denver that we know the owner very well. And it's called the Colorado Mine Company, and it's built like an old mine shaft in the inside. So it's fairly dark. It's not well lit restaurant. And I'm sure we could find one of the back corners with a uniform on where we could sit and you could have dinner. He goes, man, that's a great idea. Let's do it. So we get a uniform. And of course, he wanted it. This is when he was thin still and looked really good. He wanted it to be tailored to fit him. So we call up a tailor that worked at the old fashioned bar.
Oh,
store.
Sure. Oh, man.
We knew the tailor there. And of course, again, you say, hey, could you come up and fit Elvis Presley? The guy couldn't wait to get in his car and drive up there. And so we get the uniform. He comes up, he tailors it, he takes it back and sews it up, does what he has to do. We put him in this uniform, and obviously we have lots of pictures. I think you got some pictures of him,
sure.
Peter, in that uniform. So we call Buck Scott up, who owned the mine company, and told him what we wanted to do, and he said, no problem. He said, come through the kitchen, and we'll bring him through the kitchen, and we'll go back in that little corner area where it's pretty dark, and we'll set up a table back there. He said, nobody will even know who it is. He said, as long as you got him in uniform. So we brought him to the kitchen and took him inside, and we sat at this table, and the chief was there, and Jerry was there, and I was there. There was probably 6 or 8 from the police department, and then Joe Esposito was there, and a couple of his people from Memphis were there, and we're having dinner, and a couple of things out of that night. He saw on the menu. Are you still there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. He saw on the menu this sandwich that was called Fool's Gold, and it was just a spiff thing that Buck put on the menu, and it was a whole loaf of bread that was peanut butter, jelly, and bacon. Had a whole pound of bacon on it, and it was on the menu for $100. And there would be times when people would actually order it, people as a spoof gift or something funny. But Elvis saw that on there, and he goes, man, peanut butter and jelly is one of my favorite things. I want one of those. So Buck makes him one of the sandwiches, and we're sitting there, and pretty soon, after about 20 minutes, he said, can I use the restroom? And Buck said, yeah, I'll take you into my office. And he said, no, I can just use the public restroom. I looked at him kind of crazy like, and I said, are you sure? And he goes, no. He said, I'm in uniform. Nobody will recognize me. And so we walk up near the front door where, Peter, you remember that was
do I ever? Yes, I do. Yes.
And so we walked by all the people sitting up there, and he's in uniform, and really nobody paid attention to him. And as we walked by these two ladies that were sitting there, as we passed them, one of them said to the other one, man, that police officer looked kind of familiar. And he heard that. And we go into the restroom. He went in the restroom. I stood out by the door. And he comes out. We walked back by these same two ladies. And he looked down at them and gave them that Elvis grin. And walked back to the table. And we were there for maybe another 10 minutes. And he said, I need to use the restroom again. And I thought, wait a minute. And really, Peter, what it was, he did too good a job of hiding him. And it was the first time in years that nobody was oohing and ahhing over Elvis. And I think it really, in retrospect, I think it really bothered him.
You told me this story. Yeah.
I said, are you sure? Yeah, I need to use the restroom again. So we walk up, man, right by the same two ladies. And of course, this time he walks really slow and he looks down and he gives them that Elvis smile and grin and walks in the restroom. And as we're walking back out, that lady looks back up. She goes, sir, you look just like you are Elvis Presley. He starts going bananas. And I thought, all this trouble we went through to make sure nobody recognized him. Yeah. And now people up there, and I said to Buck, hey, you got to keep everybody away from back here. Well, luckily we were close to leaving anyway, but that was the incident. But there's another story about the Fool's Gold. I was down in New Orleans giving a speech to the National District Attorneys Association, and he called me on the phone and said, hey, it's going to be Lisa Marie's 8th birthday. So you can know how many years ago that was. He said, where are you at? I said, I'm in New Orleans. And he said, if I send a plane for you, can you come to Graceland? And we're going to have a birthday party for Lisa Marie. And I said, yeah. So I'm sitting at a table at the District Attorneys Association. And I say to these guys sitting around, I said, Elvis is sending me a plane to pick me up. And of course, everybody, oh, yeah, sure, he's going to say. I said, no, really, he's sending a plane. They couldn't believe it so much that they said, okay, we're going to take you to the airport. We want to see this plane coming and pick you up. Okay. So we get to the airport. Elvis at that time had 2 airplanes. He had the big Lisa Marie, and then he had the smaller plane that was called the Hound Dog. And that's the one he sent. And of course, everybody recognized it. So these guys are amazed that I was telling the truth about him sending this airplane for me. So I fly to Memphis, and he said, and Jerry Kennedy and Bob Cantwell were already there. He had already invited them in for this party. And he said, we want to have the party at 30,000 feet, flying you guys back to Denver. Can we do that? I said, well, we can do anything you want. You own the airplane. Yeah. And so we went out, and he asked us to go out. Linda Thompson was his girlfriend at the time. And her and I and Bob Cantwell went out and bought some party favors and some balloons and bought a birthday cake and brought it back. And we're getting ready to take off, and we get up in the air, and he said, hey, when we land, he said, do you think those guys from the restaurant what's that guy's name? And I said, Buck Scott. He said, yeah. Do you think that he would bring me out a couple of those Fool's Gold sandwiches? And I said, yeah, I'm sure he will. So we call through the telephone that's in the airplane to Buck, and he meets us at the Combs aircraft.
Combs Gates is what the story he told me is at Combs Gates.
Combs Gates aircraft.
Yeah.
And he brought out, I think he brought out, Buck well enough.
Sure.
That he brought out like 5 of those big long sandwiches and some champagne. And anyway, that's the story about the Fool's Gold sandwiches.
And Buck told, loving stories, not just, hey, you got to meet this guy. He told stories as you tell those stories. In the end, and I know you guys went to the funeral, and I saw you afterward. I know that's very, personal and emotional. Well, and if you don't, and if I'm out of line, tell me I'm out of line. But if you would, what was the end like, and what was it like in Memphis when he passed away?
Joe called me. I was getting ready to go on tour. They were leaving the next day on tour, and I was going to be on that tour with them. And Joe called me and gave me the information about him dying. And I got right to the airport. I said, I'll fly down tonight. And I flew down there that night, and I was there for the entire time and through the funeral. And we were honorary pallbearers. The Bob Cantwell, myself, and Jerry following the casket, but we stood by the casket. It was laying in state in the living room at Graceland, and they asked us if we would stand by the casket because they were letting just other movie stars and singers and people that knew Elvis.
Did Anne Margaret come to the funeral? Did Anne Margaret come to the funeral?
Anne Margaret came down. But the one that really affected me was Chuck Berry came.
Wow.
And he came, and it was an open casket laying in the living room. And Chuck Berry came up, and he walked over to the casket, and he dropped down on both knees and started crying.
Yeah.
That was Chuck Berry.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very emotional. I mean, the people that showed up it was amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing.
The stories will go on. I'll give you, when I see it, because I know when you're home we'll see each other, I will get you a copy of that book and have you and Bobby read it. What an intricate life. When I think about this guy, and you and I have we've known some people through our friendships together and the lifetime together, but this guy has to stand out. When he stands out to you, I think that's meaningful. So final, if I can, final thoughts about Elvis Presley and what you think he was all about.
He was born extremely poor, lived in a very project area. In fact, I asked him one time, I said, why do you want to stay up so late at night until 2 and 3 in the morning and then want to sleep during the day? But yet you make us put, every hotel we go to, you make us put newspaper and tinfoil on the windows so that it remains so dark in the room. He said, he paused for a minute, and it was just him and I sitting in the room in Vail, Colorado, when this all happened. He said, when I was growing up, it was such an awful place where we were at in Tupelo. He said, crime-ridden. He said, I was afraid at night. I would hear sirens all the time, and there was so much activity that was bad things happening in the neighborhood. He said, I had a hard time going to bed at night. And he said, I've gotten this fear about nighttime. And he said, so when you guys cover all the windows and everything. When I go to lay down then, he said, subconsciously, I know it's light outside and it's daytime, and it makes me more comfortable. But he said I couldn't sleep if there were light in the room, and that's how that all came about. But his generosity is the one thing that I emphasize to people. And the other thing was all these rumors about all of his drug problem. It all occurred because of two medical doctors created Elvis's problem. Early in life, he had a hard time going to bed. So they would prescribe barbiturates to get him to sleep. And then he'd be in the morning and getting ready for a concert, and he'd be groggy and not really full awake. So they prescribe amphetamines to pep him up. So you go barbiturates to amphetamines, barbiturates to amphetamines. And this was created by two doctors. And I'm going to name them both. Unfortunately, or fortunately, they're both passed. One was Dr. Nikopoulos from Memphis, and the other one was a guy by the name of I still remember his name. He was from Las Vegas. His name was Elias Ghanem, and he was actually even a member of the Nevada State Boxing Commission. But he was known as, I won't use the word again, but it starts with a W, and it's referred to Women of the Night.
Yep.
He was that kind of a doctor because stars could know they could go to him for any kind of drug they wanted, and as long as they paid him handsomely and gave it, he wore all kinds of diamond jewelry. And Dr. Nikopoulos got a house built for himself that Elvis paid for. These two doctors created one heck of a problem, and I still blame them. May not be 100% correct, but I blame them for what the problems were with Elvis's drug problem.
In recovery, there's a term called doctor shopping, and there was doctors you could shop them. That's I tell you what, Ronnie, I owe you whatever it is, and whenever you come home, and we'll try and get Bobby, and we at least get a holiday lunch in. I missed the last one, and it's a good man. And what was the name of the kind of truck that Bob got? The Dodge that it had like an El Camino or El Camaro, or what the hell was the name of that?
No, it was a Dodge Power Wagon.
It was a Power Wagon. Does Bob still have it? I think he does.
No, he sold it about 2 years ago.
Okay.
He had it up until about 2 years ago, and he sold it.
I'll talk to you when you're home. Get home safe.
All right.
Thanks,
do me
Ronnie.
a favor.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Peter. Peter.
Yes, sir.
Say hi to my friend Patrick Vitale.
Hey, how are you, Peter?
You got it.
With Pat, listening to all the old stories about Elvis. I've enjoyed it as much as all your listeners.
Well, I'll tell you what. Now, those guys, and what triggers this, man, first of all, thanks for sharing, Ronnie. A guy sends a book out to me called Elvis and the Colonel. And it's revisionism on a lot of levels, but I've read a lot of the books and met a lot of the guys, and nobody ever had good words for Tom Parker, including Ronnie a moment ago. And this guy says you got to make the distinction and go. It's a brilliant book. I mean, the guy's a gifted writer. He's written Steve McQueen books and everything. So that triggers all of this to get Ronnie, and Ronnie's only telling the good stories because I know the other ones too. And I always said that, what do you want on your tombstone? And said, we had us a time, because with the Petros, we had us a time. And Jerry Kennedy hung the moon. He really did. And I can never, people, I'm trying to write now, and you start to write stuff and you show them to an editor or a reader, and they'll say, this didn't happen. And I go, yeah. In fact, I cleaned it up a little bit. So I want these guys.
All right, thanks, Peter.
Thanks, man. Weekend. Merry Christmas. Thank you. You're not going to get better. That was perfect. Ski resorts are experiencing better snow conditions and make it a perfect time to consider taking your skis and boards out for a tune. Larson Ski and Sport, maybe even getting some new gear for Christmas. The best winter sports equipment. Head over to Larson Ski and Sport. It is just the place, located just south of I-70 on Kipling. So you're going westbound on I-70. Get off on the Kipling exit, stay in the left lane, come down the bottom of the hill to the light. Then make a left, head under I-70. When you come out on the other side, you see a big wooden building, says Larson Ski and Sport. 7 days a week with Paul and Jackie and, of course, the man, John Marriott. Whether you're looking to rent or buy equipment, Larson's got you covered. Dedicated to providing you with the best skiing experience possible. The convenience of Larson's is unbeatable. A perfect stop on your way up and or down the mountain. You find them a large wooden building right there south of I-70 on Kipling. John Marriott and the crew are absolute experts at everything that you will need for winter sports. Stop in today. Tell them Peter Boyles sent you. Larson Ski and Sport, 7 days a week, south of I-70 on Kipling, 303-423-0654, 303-423-0654. Now I say good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Saturday, December the 7th, 2024, the anniversary of Pearl Harbor 83 years ago. Our phone number 303-696-1971. We might have Robby Pietrafeso come up, and that's just been remarkable talk radio. Tomorrow, the 39th annual toy run, when we go to from different locations. Folks go to Children's Hospital and bring unwrapped toys. Looking forward to tomorrow. And we're just kicking around an open line. So let's try here. Hey, Mike, you're on the radio show. Happy Saturday. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Peter. I'm a retired Denver cop, too. And thanks to you and all the stories. I'll tell you a little bit of a story that clicks into Ron's about that gym. I was a community officer and assigned to District 2 when it was tore down. I was working for Mike O'Neill, and I knew the stories thanks to you and, growing up in the department about Elvis buying that gym. And that plaque that Ron was talking about, we were moving to the new superstation. And, the old district stations look like something out of what I call Adam 12. They were small, really tiny. And so this gym was old, and it was nothing like, the station that we were moving to, which was like a 24-hour fitness gym. It was big and nice and whatever. But I took that plaque down and physically carried it to the news station and made sure it was installed there. And that's where Jerry must have gotten it, taken it down. And I told Mike, we've got to make sure we save this plaque. I'm glad it went to Ron because, it matters to him now. Because I was glad to hear when he said that he had it and that Jerry got it. He must have got it from the new station. Because that's where I put it. I put it in the new gym.
Wow.
So that guys, would have some sort of a legacy, because that old station now is a Walgreens.
Yep.
And the new station, the community room, is named the Mike O'Neill Community Room.
I love Mike O'Neill. He's one of
So
the
did I.
greats.
I mean,
one of the
he's
greats.
He's a legend.
Yes, he is.
The man's a legend. And, when I would hold community meetings there, I would just touch his picture. And, he was obviously still alive. And, we're rough on each other. And I said, man, you're in an esteemed company. Only you and Pena and Webb got buildings. And Mike's like, of course he used that finger.
Well, they named, Stapleton. They named Stapleton Kennedy International because Jerry Kennedy's running the airport, and they called it Kennedy International. O'Neill was, just central casting, just a good man.
He was central casting, and now we're losing all of that because I was blessed. I mean, I came on in the 80s, and we had characters. And I was blessed because I got to work there.
Well, I'll tell you what,
I got to,
I know. I'll tell you what.
I got to know these legends. And I mean, when I was a puppy, I mean, I got to work with guys like Ron Pietrafeso. I worked for Bob Cantwell. He gave my daughter a bird. Yeah. And I worked for Bob Cantwell. He was my night shift lieutenant.
I don't know if I know what it is. It's we're running out of time. And in just the last 2 weeks, 2 Denver columnists, Bill Husted and now Dick Kreck. Now,
because I remember Husted was Mr. Society, and Kreck was he was the curmudgeon with Inkscape. He's the guy that wrote the Small Dome book.
Yes, he did. And the jacket that was given, it's called City Side Columnist. And Kreck was one of them, and Billy, and so they had a remembrance, if that's the right word, for Bill, and they had it in Shanahan's, which is totally appropriate to have it in a bar. And I went, I sat with Patty Calhoun, and people got up and spoke, and I didn't, and Patty said, well, now we're going to have Peter speak. And Billy and I worked together and just hung out together. And I wasn't expecting to say anything. I didn't know what I was going to say, but the losses have become so great. And only thing I could really think of was at the end of Gone with the Wind. And, Rhett's left her and the little girl's dead and everything's burned down, and when the narrator says that era and I'm not defending the era, just rather the words. And he said, it's gone. It's gone with the wind. And
it is gone.
Oh,
Mayor
it is
Bill's gone.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is gone because, you know, when I think of Bob Cote and I think of, because I tell people all the time, you know, they make the police out as the bad guys always.
No.
But you know what? We cared. I mean, I still walked the beat when I first came on. And, you know, we knew guys like Bob Cote. And the thing is, we knew to give those guys a hand up. I mean, my first off-duty job was helping guys do the breathalyzer at the Samaritan
believe
shelter.
me.
If you
Believe
blew red,
me.
you got it. You didn't come in.
Quick Cote story. So I'm the MC, I guess, of Bob's funeral. And they held it at Coors Field. And Mike Rosen got up and spoke and was just wonderful. And it was just, you know, we knew. So I'm standing in there. They had a big podium, and I'm behind the podium. And this is a true story. And this woman comes up and she said, "You're Peter Boyles?" And I said, "I am." And she said, "I was married to Bob Cote." and I'm looking at her like,
you.
"Oh yeah, no, not only that. I mean, like I knew like all of his wives, or at least I thought I did." And she was a new one, and she said, "I'd like to get up there and say something nice about him." And I looked at, you know, I don't know who greenlit it, who said, "Yeah, sure," you know, but that was that was who he was. And I still remember that, stepping down. And I think it was before services. There wasn't really services. It was more just people standing up there and thanking him. And you can't ask for more than that.
I'll tell you a quick homeless person story I used to tell my recruits, one of which was Ronnie's son, Kent. And this one quick story. Kent told me that when he was 5 years old, Elvis sang him happy birthday over the phone.
I believe it. Sure.
That's a quick story. But anyway, this guy never could come into the shelter when I was working there. You know, I'd always shove a couple sandwiches and an orange in his pocket and off he'd go. Well, he asked me, you know, "Your kids like Disney characters?" And I'd say, "Yeah, you know, who doesn't?" You know, and he goes, "Well, who do they like?" And I said, Bambi and Thumper, because that was the re-release that year, 1987, of the Disney movies, before VHS and all that. They'd re-release them to the theaters. So a couple of weeks later, the priest that ran the Samaritan shelter downtown, Catholic priest, said, "Hey, I got something for you, a couple cardboard tubes." And I said, and he goes, "This is from the guy, your friend, that you always give food to." And I unroll it, and there's Bambi and Thumper. And I said, "Man, this guy can draw." He said, "Well, he should, because he was one of Walt Disney's original artists. He drew Bambi and Thumper."
And it ended up on the street. Yeah.
Right. In 1963, his wife and daughters were killed in a car wreck. And Walt sent him to every rehab there was, and he ended up on the street, and he's been on the street at every mission I've ever worked with. And I used to tell the recruits, never judge a guy, because there, by the grace of God, go you.
Yeah, there were people that I've met in recovery that I obviously would not use their names, but you'd be surprised. The best Cote story, so many great Cote story, Bob Cote's stories, that Bob had a guy that would come in and out of the early days at Step, and people would donate, you know, really expensive suits and clothes and shirts. And Bob and we called him the ambassador, because when they get him all dressed up and we put him on TV, it kind of looked like $1 million. So Bobby lived at Step for a while before everything got, you know, before all the city changes that began after Coors Field. So he told the story. He said it's, you know, probably this time of the year, it's cold. And Bobby had this old beat up pickup truck, and he parks it behind Step, and he's cutting through the alley, and there's the guy. And he's laying there, and he says, "Bob, I can't move." He said, I've broken my spine," or whatever he said. I said, "I can't move, Bob. I can't move. I'm paralyzed." Well, what had happened? Stories for the radio show when you're an old man. He had urinated in his pants when he OD'd, when he fell down in probably about 10 o'clock at night, and he wet his pants. I'm being kind. And so his pants froze to the concrete during the night. The urine froze his legs through the wet pants to the sidewalk. And Bob sees the guy's got his legs akimbo, as they say, and he can't move. He said, "Bob, I'm paralyzed." So Bob, empathetic as he was, he goes over and he grabs the guy's leg and he makes the noise. They're breaking the ice. And Bob, then Bob really boots him, like, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with you. Get up." But that was the best. I mean, there were so many great stories about those
that's
guys.
It. I've got them too. I mean, that's just like being a cop.
It has to be.
And Peter, that's what we love about you, because you and Hal Moore, you bring us back.
Well, Hal did it.
When you were talking about rock and roll and that, Hal's about it for that generation. I mean, when I was growing up, Hal Baby Moore,
I'll say this,
J Mac, that was it.
Finest disc jockey I ever heard was Hal Moore. I mean, just doing the 101, not the Don Imus stuff, and not the stuff that like we talked about, Bubba the Love Sponge and all that stuff, but just the timing, and he was impeccable. And Hal Moore, hands down, the best disc jockey that was ever in this city. And you could argue, he's but the whole bit of being a disc jockey changes and things change with it. But Hal was poor.
Wasn't Hal and Charlie about it for one of the most popular Denver type shows?
Teams in Denver. I was lucky enough to work with a guy named Bob Lee, and we had a good run.
I listened to you and Bob.
Oh, Bob was.
And the Lone Ranger skits.
But remember,
I was thinking about when you said, do you remember like Glenn Owens?
Sure. But remember, there's Lewis and Floor Wax. There were so many great teams in the city.
The KLAK Ranch Hands. I just remember that growing up.
That team radio is very, very difficult to hold together. Number one, and I mean, if we were just sitting talking, but those guys, every team got replaced. Stephen B. and the Hawk, both of them are gone now, but knew them both really well when we worked together at Sandusky Broadcasting. I knew Stephen and knew Donnie, Michael Floorwax and Rick Lewis. Rick Lewis is still a great friend. We talk a lot. D-Mac was, when D-Mac was gigging with Alfred, wasn't anybody better. So it comes and it goes, and it's a business that's now floundering quite a bit. But when those guys were those guys and they were good, there wasn't anybody better. I got to pull the pin. Thanks, man. 303-696-1971. Ski resorts are experiencing better snow conditions right now than in the years past, and time moves, and making it the perfect time to consider taking your skis and snowboards for tunes, making sure they get even new gear for Christmas, the best winter sports equipment, the best people that know what they're doing, Larson Ski and Sport. John Marriott, his son Jack, Paul, everybody that I've gotten to know over there and stayed over there. So whether you're looking to rent or buy equipment, Larson's has you covered. They've dedicated to providing you with the best skiing, boarding experiences possible. My grandson got outfitted. He's good to go. The convenience of Larson's is unbeatable. It's the perfect stop on your way up or down the hill. So, as I say it all the time, you're westbound on I-70, Kipling exit comes. Get off on the Kipling exit, come down the ramp on the left side, make a left turn, come underneath I-70, come out the other side, and you'll see them right on your right. There they are. It says Larson Ski and Sport. It's a large wooden building. They are there 7 days a week. Rentals, whatever you want, whatever you need. John and those guys are absolute experts at everything you need for winter sports. Stop in today. Tell them I sent you 7 days a week. Larson Ski and Sport, south of I-70 on Kipling, 303-423-0654, 303-423-0654. Larson Ski and Sport, LARSON Sport.com.
President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific.
And that was 83 years ago this morning. Actually, it would have been 83 years ago tomorrow, and the Japanese attacked Pearl. Good afternoon, everyone. 60 will be the high, 57 tomorrow, and 39 degrees on Monday. Let's go here. We go to Michael. You're on the radio show. Good afternoon.
Peter, great to be with you. How are you?
Actually, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Good. It's good to talk to you again. I have really enjoyed the show today. I did not know all of that about the STEP program. I had heard bits and pieces of it before, but Bob Cote, it's really interesting because, I was just reading about him. I was vaguely familiar with him, but I know he took this kind of hardline conservative kind of approach to homelessness. And, with the Social Security and that kind of idea of that saying, well, that's bad. We need the homeless to, work and kind of, but I think that not that he was missing this, but there's a root of every issue, and you have to look at, some of what's bringing this on for a lot of the homeless is mental illness, is, their upbringing, their childhood problems they struggled with. And I think just to take a 100% hardline approach that, these people all need to work no matter what. I don't know. I think it could be counterproductive in a way sometimes.
Let me cut to the chase. If you treat alcohol and drug addiction like behavior, you will lose. If you treat alcoholism and drug addiction like a disease, you got a chance of winning. So before, and this was one of the hard parts of Bob, but it was the right part. I'm sorry you had a tough life. I'm sorry things didn't go well for you. But keep getting loaded, keep using dope, and we're going to find you dead. So most, and it's only a fool today that would say that it's not a disease. And it's the only disease in the world that the doctor and the patient are the same person. I am my own doctor. I am my own patient. I will die this person. Anything else that you hear out of the mouths of the city bureaucrats or anybody on some television show just isn't true. And as a matter of fact, it's dangerous because it's an excuse. And right now we have idiots that want to have storefronts that people can come in and shoot dope in. I've been in them in Vancouver. I've seen the insanity. The open border brings in a drug now that is so powerful. And all that really is I would urge you, because you are a reader, go read about the opium wars. Go read about what the British and to a degree the Americans did to the Chinese with opium. They fed them opium. They destroyed the empire with opium. Chinese have very long memories. What fentanyl is doing now, brought in here by the Chinese and by the Mexican cartels, it's a repeat. We destroyed them, they destroyed us. And they will. And if everybody keeps kissing behinds on junkies and addicts and alcoholics, it's going to end up in a very bad place. It is a disease. Treat it like a disease. It's not behavior. And it's genetic.
Yeah,
there's genetic predispositions. There's all kinds of reasons why. But I had somebody in my life that was so brilliant about any of this stuff. And he said, just accept the fact that you are. Don't go looking for excuses. Don't go looking for reasons. Don't blame anybody else. It's yours. You own this. And that's the time it changes. And that's when it changes. The rest of this insanity with this fool that runs the city and the fool that ran the city before him and the fool that ran the city before him. And between that and the illegals, it's Rome. Read The Fall of the Roman Empire, and you'll catch full. And all of this stuff, that's why I played the Pearl Harbor thing this morning. It is all repetitive. And it will happen again and again and again. Michael, it's just the truth.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I think I've said this before, but, I consider myself personally to be an independent, to kind of be moderate.
Great.
And always look at things from both sides of the coin. But when you look at the prison system, for example, I know that Bureau of Prisons just announced they're closing down a bunch of the prisons, the one in Englewood, Colorado. But I think you got to look at the recidivism, reasons for recidivism. People go into prison with a mental illness. It doesn't get treated for whatever reason. They get out, and then they cannot, get to that place where they're stable and can look for a job and get a job and get those services. Okay, well, why look at the root cause though?
How come you're not in prison?
I'm sorry?
How come you are not in prison?
Oh, well, that's
you don't have an answer. You're double clutching. Why are you not in prison?
Well, I just choose to be an upstanding citizen, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But like I say, we got to get to the root of the issue and treat.
All right. I'll give you the last shot here. If you took 100 guys that are sitting in the joint right now, what do you think the number one reason is that why they're there?
I think part of it's due to untreated mental illness. I think
drugs and alcohol.
Due to
drugs and alcohol.
There's many reasons.
Drugs and alcohol. You're high how many of those guys do you think? And I've been with Cote in the day room in Denver County. He said, how many people? And there's 100 guys in the room. He said, how many people in this room were here because they were trying to get money to get high? They were high. They were coming down off of a high and didn't know where they were or what they were doing. And he went down a list of things. Almost 100% of the hands went up. Why? Because they mugged somebody, because they stuck something up, because they did this, they did that, they did the other thing. They were high. Get people away from drugs and alcohol. Get them in a place where you can rationally speak to somebody. Then you might have a chance.
Yeah, and I think what Bob Cote was doing was it's an amazing concept, and I think it's proven to work. But I think
he wasn't loved by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
All right, man. I'm on a wall. Take care. 303-696-1971. Here it is. You ever feel conflicted when somebody on the street asks you for money? You want to help, don't help. Bob's great line was, you want to help them, don't help them. There is a better way, and it's making donations to Step Denver, which you can do right now for Colorado Gives Day at coloradogives.org/StepDenver. Every day, men walk through the doors of Step on Larimer and right in front of Coors Field and make a commitment to sobriety, work, and accountability to recover from their addictions and rebuild their lives. Stories are unbelievable. I have seen firsthand for over 40 years. Step Denver is the proven solution, and I can tell you why. We're just in this conversation with this last caller. Colorado Gives Day is December the 10th. Step Denver is counting on people like you to invest in men who are investing in themselves. Becoming contributing members of our community, Step makes real changes happen. Every dollar you donate will be turned into $5 on the impact of it. And since they don't take any government money, Bob knew, we used to talk about, Charles de Gaulle said it about NATO. He said, if you let the camel put his head in the tent, the camel's in the tent. And Bob knew if the government put its head in the tent, the government was in the tent. Don't wait for December 10th. Make your tax-deductible donation today. coloradogives.org/StepDenver. coloradogives.org/StepDenver. You ready, Adam? Let's do a quick turnaround. Good afternoon, everyone. 7 December. It's a Saturday. 60 will be the high, and tomorrow for the toy run, it'll be 57 degrees. Lines are jammed. Danny Kaplis' law firm, and he's a friend. I'm going to do his radio show this week on the Ramseys. And Dan suggested, and it's true, you choose a lawyer that shares your values, because who you choose to represent you in an injury case says so much about you and everybody involved in the case. Dan's, of course, dad was a cop. We're talking about cops this morning. His mother must have been something. He's dedicated the last 40 years of his life to helping people who got hurt in serious motor vehicle cases. We had a problem in our family 8 years ago. I'm working with Dan. I hooked him, and he came, and it was the best. Believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado history to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. Believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history. As I mentioned, I'm going to do a show with him next week. Danny's law firm, the official law firm now, the Denver Nuggets, Colorado Avalanche, Kaplis Law, serious firm for serious cases. Danny accepts righteous injury cases on percentage fee basis. He can represent good people like you, all walks of life, without regard and ability to pay. And if you, again, just want a question answered, 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551. He is the man. DanKaplisLaw.com. It's CAPLISLaw.com. Let's go to the phones. We go to line 3. Judy waited. Hi, Judy. You're on the radio show. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hey.
Good morning, and thank you so much. It's lovely to speak with you.
Thank you.
I know you've probably discussed this several times, and I may have missed it. I am at a loss on this Ramsey thing that I started watching on Netflix last night. I don't know. I've always thought that Patsy was the guilty one, although I don't understand why she would be so violent to her daughter. However, why is John Ramsey doing this now? I don't get this.
Well, you have to sell it, and they have a CU professor that is a pretty much despicable human being. He knows who he is. He's the guy that groomed John Mark Carr, the lady man. There's idiot district attorneys up there. But let me just cut to this is what I'm going to do with Danny this week. Charlie Brennan was the co-author of the book, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. And I will guarantee you, I haven't seen this Netflix trilogy, and I know I won't. I just have no need to see it. But Brennan did the half of the book, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. So the grand jury came back, and I was standing in the Boulder County Justice in their parking lot with Geraldo Rivera, totally expecting Alex Hunter, the district attorney, because remember that these people saw everything, things that we never saw, they saw. And then when he refused to pull the pin, I mean, it was just like the ship sunk. So years go by, and grand jurors don't talk. This grand juror did. And the grand juror went to Charlie, because Charlie's very reputable, very trustworthy reporter, and said, we collectively, the grand jury, wanted to indict John and Patsy both for the murder of their daughter. Now, I got $20. I haven't seen the Netflix series. I have no intention. I got $20 that they never say that in that Netflix series. They never say that Charlie Brennan said, and Charlie's a reporter. So always bury that. And the other moment that I can talk about is Bill Owens was governor, and I was writing things for Bill because he was appearing on the Today Show. And there was a meeting in a room off the governor's office. It's a big boardroom. After Hunter did what Hunter did, and Bill Owens, to his credit, had gathered FBI murder squads and DAs and, everybody that does that kind of work, and said, by a show of hands, how many of you believe Patsy Ramsey was the murderer? Every hand went up.
Okay.
Now, whatever Netflix does, whatever these creeps do, I was surprised of the people that I respect that put their nose in there. I got contacted and told them no, I wanted nothing to do with them. So, and so it goes, as Kurt Vonnegut said. Yeah, I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I thank you for that. I've been listening to you on this for years and years, actually, since it occurred. And I don't know why they're getting by with this. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Because it sells. I mean, that's not that tough to answer. Why was the Mike Tyson fight so popular? It was because everybody wanted to see it. And, you know, the Ramseys they're very cagey. And they've had cagey lawyers, and they've had people like, Channel 9 is a great example of a Ramsey. The Rocky Mountain News was the Ramsey Mountain News. People learned to choose. Larry King. Larry was a Ramsey clown. The last time I was invited on the Larry King show, Larry used to have, Patsy has a sister named Pam, who I dubbed Crazy Aunt Pam. The United States of America and its history of United States Miss Americas, there's only been two states that had sisters as Miss Americas. One was Arkansas, and the other was West Virginia. Both Patsy Ramsey and her sister Pam had been Miss West Virginia. So she would appear on Larry, and she would say that every night, she called her Johnny B, John Benet. She would come to her and talk to her. And so I'm on Larry, and I said, Larry, the next time Johnny B appears to Aunt Pam, for God's sake, ask her who killed her. And at that point, I never was invited back to Larry. Channel 9 was ridiculous. They were so bad. Paula Woodward, you know, what happened at the Rocky Mountain News? People chose, I don't know why they chose sides, but then when Patsy would invite people to these little sit downs, and these people would suck up, and they said they would bring these people into the room with John and Patsy Ramsey. They would build a set, literally a television set, and the only deal that you had to make was you could not ask them about the murder of their daughter. And I said, what are you going to ask Patsy about the euro? I mean, what is it that Patsy has that you need to know? And the answer was nothing. They just wanted to be connected to them. Listen, there are people that, well, you know, they are who they are. They did what they did. And remember, they had lawyers by the time the sun went down, and, you know, John was going to leave town. And you talk to
He makes excuses for all that, too, on Netflix. And all of these reporters are interviewed. I know you don't want to watch it, but you might be interested.
I can run down a list and tell you who was on that. I told them, get away from me. You know, you're trying to.
Listen, I appreciate it.
No, don't.
I appreciate you're foremost expert in this. But my last question is, why did they do it?
It was an accident.
Okay.
She's a bedwetter and a defecator, and so they were leaving for the next day for their they have a place in Charlevoix, Michigan, and they were going to go. It was traditional, and so the weapon is a flashlight. They found the flashlight in the house, but it had been taken apart like a mortar rounds. All the batteries were wiped clean of fingerprints in the case itself. So Patsy was going to check because Jean Benet was a bedwetter. Yeah, and I used to sit with people at the Kemp Center, and they said it's the only thing the kid could control in her whole life. And so Patsy went down, and Jean Benet took off running. And Patsy's a rager, and she reached out. And as a matter of fact, the Boulder authorities did not know that she had been hit on the back of the head until the next morning. That was the first strike. Patsy hit her with the flashlight on the back of the head where she was running. And then she's got this little girl who, and there's an insight to Patsy. Everything had to be perfect. And they had a dog, and the dog's name was Jacques. This is a true story. And Jacques was obviously a Francophile name, but a French name. Well, the dog had a weird ear. And so Patsy spies the ear. And my understanding takes the dog back to the breeder because the dog's not perfect. The kids loved the dog. So she swaps the dog back out and she brings home this other dog that's perfect. Kids come home from school and there's a big hoorah about the dog being perfect. I called that chapter the second Jacques on the grassy knoll, that they had to swap dogs out. You have to understand them. You have to understand that they are perfect people. They are, and that's why everybody got mad in Boulder, because Boulder's a perfect place. That can't happen in Boulder. How could that dare happen in Boulder? So they were perfect people, and everything that was about them was perfect. And then now they have a little girl. They've struck her. Patsy struck her, and they couldn't very well take her to Boulder General. So they took her downstairs, and not John. John's not part of this yet. But Patsy, who is, and she garrots the little girl with her own paintbrush. And it was like a rabbit warren down there. And she knew where the paintbrush was. She used the paintbrush and as the ligature, and she took the little girl's life. And initially, that's why the Boulder cops screwed that up so badly. And at the time, Dave Machad ran the Denver PD and had a murder squad. He offered the murder squad to come to Boulder. They told him no. And remember that note, quote unquote, almost a 3-page, it is a 3-page ransom note. Mm-hmm. They say on their note, if we so much as see a cop, she's dead. I'm paraphrasing. First thing Patsy does, calls 911. Pulling in the driveway, a black and white. And remember, it's the holidays too. So everybody's a rookie. All the young cops are the ones that are catching the jobs. And then they had a woman, a lieutenant that came in, and they I said they had a phone tree. They called everybody they knew, and they brought people into the house, the Fernies, the Haberstock, the Whites. I mean, they're just letting people overrun the house. And then in the end, they get a lawyer. And before the sun goes down, they get a lawyer. Now, if your daughter was, well, I can't even imagine, but no, they knew. I mean, they knew what they knew, and they shopped lie detector people. And I mean, it was just one horrible thing after another. Becomes a media war. And then one of Kaplas's many theories, and Kaplas is really good on this, that there seemed to be an endless supply of this little girl performing. And as Danny said, and you look at it and you know that he's onto it, they sexualized that little girl. Have you ever seen her perform?
Oh, yeah. It's pathetic.
Not it's a bit, but do you think she was sexualized?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What 6-year-old looks like that and performs that way? None. And has those bodily, I get it.
And there's all kinds of inner family.
In hell.
Well, but they got away with it. Why John? I don't know. Twice a year, John Ramsey sheds his skin. I don't know how you could do what he has done and been involved in and not just want to go hide out. But maybe that's protesting to make himself trying to look innocent. And I'm sure there's bits and pieces of hidden stuff that I've never heard. But remember this as we end the show. Charlie Brennan, the member of the grand jury, went to Charlie and said, we wanted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey for the murder of that little girl. We wanted to indict them both for the murder of that little girl. Now, you call me back next week and tell me whether or not they admit that on that series, because I don't think they will.
Thank you so much, Peter, and have a lovely Christmas.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Think that through. Think it through. Charlie Brennan, who's a reputable stand-up guy, still with the Boulder Camera, and he did great work on that story and never got the credit that he deserved, actually. And when they got to that point, and she came and they said they wanted to indict them both. Now, those of you who are Netflix fans and Ramsey fans, see if that shows up. See if that shows up in the show. I'll see you next week. Thanks.